Hello, everybody. It's Corey Poirier here with my co-host, Kelly Filardo, once again. Welcome back, everybody, to Blue Talks, the Amplify Your Message event. I wanted to kick off today, but all week we've been talking just quickly about, since we're talking authors and stuff like that, about the Blue Talks books. I always have a hard time getting them on the screen perfectly. The first 3 Blue Talks books in the series. If you want to know more about them or anything Blue Talks, really, go to bluetalks.com and you can go up to the top of the link and check out book. You can click on the book or you can click on the podcast. You can click on the YouTube channel. So any of those things, Blue Talks, that's where you can find it. I will say as well, and I'll try to mention a few times today, sharing is caring, as cheesy as it sounds. We do contests every time around for free books. And the only real way to get in is either to comment or to share and comment, one of the two. Even if you share, if I notice that you shared it, even if you don't comment, I probably still put you in the contest. So I wanted to mention those things. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, which is big news coming down the pipeline, and I announced this before, but we're closer now. But I mentioned that this year we'll be going on to the C-Suite network with Blue Talks and also Connect TV. Connect TV, we're still working on getting that finalized. But C-Suite, the show is officially, and I don't want to send people over there yet because it's not officially, in my opinion, ready yet, but the show is officially up on C-Suite Network. What that means is we have the trailer for Blue Talks up there and the first 2 episodes, but I want to put probably about 8 episodes up before I start really promoting it. Now, having said that, what that also means is that Blue Talks is going to be moving over to Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon in the coming weeks as well. And I just was talking to them today, and it looks like it'll be on Apple TV on Tuesday at the latest. So, for example, I have the Apple 4 where you can download apps. You have to download the C-Suite Network app. But I have Generation 4 and 3. And on 4, you can download the C-Suite app. So I downloaded it last night, and literally I can watch it on my Apple TV just like any other show. So that's pretty cool news. That stuff's all coming together as well. And it's an update because I mentioned it before, but people probably wondered what's happening with that. So that's happening. Also, last quick thing I'll say about Blue Talks as an update, we also are moving over to having a page on Medium where basically we're going to be posting regularly. And what we're going to do at first is we're going to post pieces from the chapters of the Blue Talks books of the authors that want their chapter shared. We'll share a piece of it, introduce them to the author, and of course, you'll get to learn some great insight from the authors. And then, of course, as always, if you want to get more information on their chapter, you'll have to grab the book. But we'll give you enough that it doesn't feel like, we're just basically leaving you with a cliffhanger. So, again, we're going over to Medium soon. We already have the page set up. We're going over to Apple TV and Amazon. We're on Roku now, I believe, and C-Suite Network. We're already set up there. That just happened literally the last 2 days, and so on and so forth. So Blue Talks keeps on moving forward. So Kelly, before we bring our first guest on, anything you wanted to share, as a follow-up from yesterday, anything big news-wise you wanted to share, anything you want to say to set the tone today?
Well, it seemed like yesterday was a day full of laughter. So, we had lots of great content and we were doing lots of laughing and so it was awesome yesterday. I mean, all week has been great, but it just seemed like every day has a different theme. And so yesterday was all about, Clubhouse and taking your whole teaching business to a whole new level.
Today? I don't know what's going on there.
Well, it seemed like yesterday was a day full of laughter. So, we had... Did you get something running on in the background?
Yeah, it popped up. It started playing on my main page, so I had to shut that down. That was like an echo, but the universe has been working with us in funny ways this week. So yeah, to your point, yeah, we had some laughter yesterday. Great insight though, just the same. And all week every day's been different. The themes have been different, and as always, as people know with Blue Talks, we let it flow as it's a conversation. It's like a coffee conversation. So we really never know how it's going to go, and today's going to be no different. So. Having said that, so did you want to jump right in and bring our guest on then, Kelly?
Yeah, let's bring Tricia on. She's amazing. I can't wait to hear what she's got to share with us.
Awesome stuff. Hey, Tricia.
Hey, Corey. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Tricia.
Awesome. So excited to have you here. And what we usually do, Tricia, is we usually get the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves before we dive in further. I mean, we're going to dive in and learn more about you anyway. But I always feel the guest is the best bet to tell us who they are. And again, just a small backstory. Don't worry about how long or how short because we'll dive in deeper anyway. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I also want to comment, if yesterday's theme was all about laughter, should we pick tears for today? Should we do a lot of tearing up in our conversation today just to shake it up for your audience?
You can if you want. Put it this way, I'm not going to stop you.
Sounds good. I am originally from Arnold, Missouri. I moved to New York City 3 decades ago to pursue a career in dance. I danced all over the world, the Paris Opera, the Vienna Opera House. I have danced in Palermo, of course, Lincoln Center in New York City, which is where I still live. And I live on 55th and 9th. I was just telling Kelly before we went live that I live across the street from the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. So when we weren't in COVID, I got to see the dancers in the studio all the time. And now, almost a year later, the dancers are lining up outside the building, socially distanced, 6 feet apart, wearing their masks, and they go inside one at a time, and they limit the dancers to about 10 to each studio. So you cannot keep a dancer out of a studio. As a former dancer, I can say that for sure. So it's so wonderful to be able to see all those dancers going back to where it's their church, essentially. That's church. So I have been making film, television, and theater since I stopped being a dancer, and make documentary films about people. I also started the Big Talk Academy 3 years ago. One of my friends booked a TED Talk, and she asked me to direct her. And I thought, well, that sounds fun, just like a one-woman show, right? I'll do script analysis, we'll do choreography and blocking, I'll work with you on intention, objective, and action, just like I do my actors. And that was it. And then she said that I should do this. And I thought, do what? Speakers need coaches? That's a thing? I had no idea that it was a thing. And I had no idea that TED was such a big brand. And as a multi-time TED speaker, Corey, you know what that means in terms of visibility. So I thought, well, let's see what happens. And all of a sudden I had all these speakers coming around and no place to put them. Well, as a theater director, what do? We produce shows. What's the best show for speakers? TEDx. So I got my license. I produced TEDx Lincoln Square for 2 years in New York City. Moved on from that so I could have more creative control, produce Speakers Who Dare 1 year live and last year virtual. And I work with speakers in order to amplify and elevate voices to make the world a better place.
Wow, so amazing. And I love your background and how that relates to it. You know, my background is in stand-up comedy. And anybody who will listen, Kelly's heard this more than most. Anybody who will listen, I say stand-up comedy was such a great training and breeding ground for me to learn the craft of speaking and communication. And yeah. I really believe, I'll put this out there myself. And I would say actors and drama and theater probably would be equivalent. But there's nobody that studies communication more than stand-up comics. And I'll add in, like I say, actors and drama, but more so than business people, because as a comic, a lot of people wouldn't know this. There's amateur comics somewhere right now that have a 10-minute set this weekend, and they're not getting paid for it, and they're watching last week's set that they filmed 50 times and studying why they got the laugh when they stepped on the weird square. Who else studies communication like that? And so my point is, my background is such a big part of how I get into speaking, and also how I understand speaking, maybe in a different way than I would have otherwise. And it also makes me think of Michael Port, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Of course. Who
was, I think Gilliard is where he went. And he was an actor who was in Sex and the City and Ransom and a bunch of big things. He had smaller parts, but he was in a lot of big things, and then decided to basically switch over to speaking and coaching speakers. You know, so I think we're in good company is what I'm getting at.
Amazing. Thank you.
It's a great learning ground, where you went. And I think even dance adds that as well, right? The performance, and as you said, directing stage shows. And so I bring that up because I want to dive into the speaking side, of course. So maybe we'll jump in right there, if that's okay, Tricia, in terms of when you have speakers come to you and maybe they're earlier on in their journey. Can you tell us, if we kick things off right away with the do's and don'ts, is there something you see that they don't do that well when they're early on? And what would you tell them they should be doing? And so it's more of a, maybe what you see people do wrong and what you see people do right.
The biggest mistake speakers make, whether they are new or have a lot of experience, is making it about them. And newer speakers, the way they're making it about them is they have absolute stage fright. And when a new speaker says, I really want to share this message, I think it's important, but I'm terrified. I can't get on stage. I don't know how to do it. I'm just too afraid. If I can get them to shift their mindset and to remember it's not about them, it's about the audience and who they're serving, then that fear goes away, or you can coexist with it. And I'll give you a specific example. One of my speakers, James Lucas, who is an amazing human being, he said, I want to speak about being a vegan. I don't eat animal products. I don't wear animal products. And I don't consume any entertainment that has animals in it. And I said, okay, you have a very big passion about this. You have to speak for the animals. They don't have a voice. You have to speak for them. And that shifted him out of the fear, the paralyzing fear of actually being in front of people. The other thing that I did for him, which was making it not about him, helping him get out of his own way, at the Speaker Salon in New York City, when we were still coming to gather, I would put him on stage, and I would also put on stage brooms, mops, buckets, stools, music stands, anything I could find at the theater. I would just dump it onto the stage. And I would ask him to deliver his talk while he cleaned it up. Giving him something to do made it about what he was doing. So his action was cleaning up the stage while delivering the talk. He couldn't make it about him because he had something to do. So that's what I do with new speakers who are making it about them. Seasoned speakers who make it about them, I have to remind them that their interpretation of their speech is not what we care about. We care about what they're saying. We care about their message. We care about the words that they have written, or we care about the words that they're channeling, depending on whether or not they're working from a script or they're working from their history, their story. So if a speaker walks onto stage and is being themselves as a speaker instead of delivering the content with intention and meaning, they're getting in the way of their own talk. So really the biggest thing all speakers need to remember is it's not about you.
I love that. And I love that exercise that you did. It makes me think about interviews I've done with people who were terrified like me, debilitating fear of speaking when they started. And I don't know, I'd love to say this is what drove me to it, but I'm not going to say it 100% because there wasn't a moment where I said, that's it. That's why I've started this. But I did say, and I think for me, it was more because I got on a stand-up stage and I bombed. But even when I was bombing, people were escaping their day. And at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? Even when they were laughing at me bombing, they're still not thinking about the crap they have to deal with when they leave here. So for me, I think that's what it was. But I've talked to a few people. One I think of in particular, she's an Olympian, and she switched over to being a speaker. And I always assume if somebody's a performer, especially at the Olympic level, then speaking just comes naturally. And she's like, no, I was just terrified. And so I said, how did you get over it? And she said, it's when I finally realized that the fear of speaking was smaller than my why of wanting to do it. So she basically said, once I figured out a strong enough why to do it, then the how figured itself out. And basically, even though I still had the fear, I had a bigger fear of not impacting people with that message that I was trying to deliver. So like I always say, if you figure out your why, the how will come easily. And so so for her, that's what it was. But it makes me think of what you're saying, because his why is speaking for the animals. Right. And again, I know you're also talking about there's another element, which is that he's not focused on himself. But I mean, it's just interesting how that has been big enough for people to overcome that fear, is that if they can, in this case, give a voice to somebody who wouldn't have a voice, or something that wouldn't have a voice. And, in her case, figuring out what that why is, that's so powerful that you actually can't imagine not getting on stage, even though you don't want to do it. So,
Right. And I also remind my speakers that it's their responsibility to share their very important message, because there is one person in the world out of 7.8 billion who needs to hear that message so that you can change or even save their life.
I love what you're talking about, Tricia, because just at Christmas time, I was named as one of the most inspirational people of 2020 and by Global TV. And one of the cool things was I did a speech at a school to elementary kids. And so I was sharing the story of how in grade 5, when I was 11 years old, I was called Scarface. And this is a picture that was drawn of me. And so Global TV showed the clip that they made of me talking about this as an 11-year-old being Scarface. And then right after that, they showed this little 11-year-old girl saying, I now feel beautiful about myself. And I thought, oh my God, like, and here I am, I'm an 11 years old, I'm being called Scarface. And here she is, an 11-year-old who is feeling beautiful about herself. And I said, that's what my message is. That's what it's all about. It's not about me winning that award. It's all about that 11-year-old who now feels beautiful.
Right. You changed the entire trajectory of her life by giving her that gift of self-esteem and connection and seeing another woman go through her journey. It's so powerful.
Well, I'll add one thing too, Tricia, that I've shared on here before, but again, always new listeners and viewers, so I might as well share it again. But something you said there, and this ties into that idea of who are we doing this for, is people always ask me, are you still nervous when you deliver talks? And the answer for me is always yes, 100%. The secondary question, though, is what do you do to get over it and get out of your head? And so what I do, which ties into what you're talking about, what I used to do was meditate. But the problem I found with that is when you're at a large event, they sit you sometimes at the head table with the CEO of the company and the meeting planner. And so it's pretty hard to go into meditation while you're there and explain that. And then at the same time, if you get up from the table and go to the corner and meditate, they start getting worried. So I realized I couldn't do the meditation thing. And so the new thing that I did, I switched it, is basically before I get on stage, while they're reading my bio, because, somebody said, why aren't you in the moment? Well, I already know my bio. And if they screw it up, there's not much I can do to change that. So just for that 20 seconds or whatever, in my head, I always think of, and usually I'll plan it beforehand. I don't think of the thing, but I'll think of who am I going to think about? I'll think about a time when somebody said, this thing you said or did or what have you changed my life. And so I think about that before I walk on the stage because it reminds me, here is why you're here. This isn't about you. It's about that next person that might have that same feeling that this person you just told to remind it yourself had when they seen you speak, and it doesn't have to be speaking if somebody's new to speaking. It could be an article you wrote, it could be an email, it could be a blog post, it could be anything. For me, I usually go to speaking because I'm on a stage speaking, but you don't have to. But anyway, to your point, what I'm getting at there is that's my way of reminding myself before I start, this isn't about me. Just like Kelly said, you could think of that 11-year-old girl, Kelly, now every time if you want it before you got on stage. And it would change, I bet you, the way you speak rather than you not thinking about that at all or not thinking about how this is about somebody else. So I love that you said that, Tricia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So continuing down this path then, when you see, so we talked about do's and don'ts. Now, and of course, I know one of the answers would be if you make it about the audience, that's a way to be really successful as a speaker. But is there another tip or strategy you can give us that you notice that maybe world-class speakers do, or speakers that make an impact at a high level do, that other people could, I never like copy, but could sort of find a way to bring it into their own style and emulate to some degree?
I think it's important for you to know who you are as a communicator and really be authentically yourself. Something I often see with speakers is the unconscious movement quality. So let's talk about what not to do and then what we can kind of emulate or steal from excellent speakers. And I say that because Martha Graham says, steal what's good, right? Martha Graham is a fantastic modern choreographer. She's no longer with us, but she said, steal what's good. And I think that's amazing. So when you see a speaker walk onto the stage, there's several different things they do unconsciously when it comes to movement that I want to bring to your attention. There's the wanderer, which means they're wandering around the stage aimlessly without any reason, without any choreographic impact. The meanderer, which is somebody who basically shifts from side to side, forward and back, just meandering. Then there's the thigh slapper, right? You've seen this, Corey, when somebody accents what they're saying by slapping their thigh. There's the backer upper, somebody who's backing up because they're really shy and they're scared and they can't do anything except show us that in their physicality. So it's really important for speakers to understand that their physical choreography and movements are equally as important to what they're saying. And great speakers wander. So I bring everyone to the attention of know why you're moving and when you're moving. And I'm not saying you have to stand still the entire time, but I am saying you will have more impact if you understand why you're walking downstage towards the audience when you deliver a very important moment in your talk. And when you pause, whether it's vocally or physically, silence and stillness is incredibly powerful. So that's one thing. When it comes to a speaker who is really amazing, I think I had the pleasure of seeing Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama speak in New York City at the Barclays Center. They're both very impactful speakers because they're thoughtful speakers. They think before they speak. Perhaps they're highly memorized. I'm not sure. I haven't had the conversation with them, but they think before they speak. They know how to deliver with impact. They understand beat changes. They understand how to connect to an audience. So there's credibility, vulnerability, and relatability. Those are three things that all good speakers master.
I love it. And something you said there to start with, and again, Kelly, because she gets to hear this more than others, but I talk about this often is, when I open up a talk, I'll always ask people, I'll put 3 or 4 big name speakers on the slide, and I'll say, what do you feel they have in common? And of course, I know it's an open question because you could say, well, they're all world class. They all rose. There's so many answers, and I'll tell them, look, there's no wrong answer, but I am looking for a specific one. The answer that I'm looking for is Tony Robbins, as an example, isn't trying to be the next Lisa Nichols.
Right.
And Lisa Nichols isn't trying to be the next Tony Robbins. To your point about authenticity, somebody messaged me 2 days ago, and of course, like always, I'll never say a name, but sent me a LinkedIn message and said, I'd love to get in your speaking program, et cetera, et cetera. I just did a talk on stage, and I realized from that moment I want to be the next Tony Robbins. Now, I don't know her well enough to go into the details of, if she ends up working with me, why I'm going to help her change that. But again, that's how most people, when they started speaking, they pick somebody and say, I want to be the next that person. And it's okay, I feel like, if you're just saying, I want to be a great speaker. But if you literally say, I love the way they speak, so I want to act just like them, but then we discover that you're nothing like them at all, I just don't think it makes sense to try to emulate another speaker in terms of carrying out their actions. And as you said, even their nuances. And a great example is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs wandered the stage, and sometimes he looked like a guy who's wandering the stage that didn't even know where he's walking to. But who else could have pulled that off but Steve Jobs? And he was always voted in the top 5 best presenters ever. But it was Steve Jobs. He built that brand and that persona. And a person that's super high energy wouldn't be able to go out and try to emulate. They could try, but they probably wouldn't succeed. So to your point, I believe early on, it might be okay to say, okay, I'm going to watch them and learn from them. And I also think you can always learn the foundations and like we're talking, the principles and the strategies and the methods they're using. But I don't think you should ever try to say, if I succeed, I'm going to be just like Tony Robbins on the stage. Like I'm going to be him.
I wanted to be Kelsey Kirkland when I was growing up, and I emulated her as a ballerina. I was never going to be Kelsey Kirkland because I was twice as tall as her. That was never going to happen. So when it comes to being who you are, there's a couple things here, Corey, is that when you walk out onto stage and you're trying to be someone else, even if the audience loves what you're saying, there will be a slight disconnect. There will be a distrust that the audience can't quite put their finger on. It's just, I don't quite believe you and I don't know why. That's because you're not being yourself. You're trying to be someone else. So that's why it's also really important that you're constantly being who you are and letting go of the fact that you might be criticized by half the audience. It doesn't matter. Be yourself and reach the half the audience that you are meant to reach, and let go of all of the judgment, because it's going to come. You can't not be judged. It's just going to come. If you're going to put yourself onto a stage, you need to be willing to receive judgment. And when you are totally yourself, the 3 or 4 people that you're meant to reach, oh my gosh, you're going to have so much impact on those 3 or 4 people, or that 11-year-old girl. And that's what it's all about, is really trusting that who you are is good enough and who you're supposed to reach is out there.
Well, and Kelly, I want to let you jump in as well, but I'll add something you just said, Tricia. I think this is probably, I'm interested to see if you've heard this before, but I think this is a good lesson for people, and it's not mine, and it's even not hers, but we had Tasia Valenza, one of our Blue Talk speakers, who's an Emmy-winning voiceover actress, and so she knows communication, she knows the nuances, and she shared this story. I think it was with an acting instructor that shared it with her, I think she said, and Kelly knows where I'm going with this, I think, but she said, "What's your favorite ice cream?" And she was talking Ben and Jerry's. And she said she loves, and I forget the name, but let's just say it was Toffee Fudge. Let's just say that was it. She said, "I love Toffee Fudge, but you know what I hate? Cherry Garcia." But she said Cherry Garcia is one of, or the best-selling Ben and Jerry's ice cream. So the message she said is, it's okay that I'm chocolate because everybody loves chocolate or Toffee Fudge or whatever it is. A lot of people, not everybody, a lot of people love Toffee Fudge, and they don't like Cherry Garcia. But guess what? There's all kinds of people that like Cherry Garcia that don't like Toffee Fudge.
Right.
And so what she was saying is, be who you are, and there's lots of people that you're still going to reach. And have you ever heard of that metaphor before? I heard it for the first time this week.
No, but I love that metaphor, and I actually love Cherry Garcia.
There you go. And I I'm not a cherry person, so I don't think I would like it. I don't even think I've tried it, but it's such a great metaphor because it is so true. And I think it also opens your eyes that, you know what, you're not for everybody, but there's still going to be people that you're for. And you can still build a really big audience with that small amount of people. And I say small relatively, like, what do they say? It takes 1,000 true fans. So, I mean, you don't need 8 billion. You
Right.
might be trying to serve 8 billion, but and you probably don't even need 1,000, but let's just say the 1,000 true fans, it's a lot easier to find 1,000 doing what you like, and you can go deeper with them and being authentically you than trying to find 8 billion by trying to be the next Tony Robbins or whoever that is. So I think the ice cream metaphor is a really good one to think about. You know what? It's okay if I'm chocolate and not Cherry Garcia.
And I think also you're touching on something that I'd love to explore a little bit more, Corey. I've had many speakers come to me as well and say, I want to be the next Tony Robbins. It's the first thing most new speakers say, right? Because he's the ultimate guy. And in many points of view. But point of view is where I want to go with this. He has built who he is by living his life. Mm-hmm. You cannot be who he is because you haven't lived his life. And your point of view is what makes you uniquely you. He has his upbringing. He has his way of living. He has his family. He has his community. That's who makes him Tony Robbins. So to all of a sudden say, I want to be the next this person, it's impossible because you've not lived that life. You don't have that point of view. So when you understand where you grew up, how you grew up, what your thought processes are, what you believe in, what your purpose, mission, and values are, that is going to give you the strength, the foundation, the clarity, and the authenticity to be the speaker you are meant to be. And guess what? What if it's better than Tony Robbins? How amazing would that be?
So true. And I just wanted to comment. We had somebody just put a note. Thanks. I'm watching from Uganda. That's pretty cool. I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, to your point, great example is Brendan Burchard. So yeah. Brendan Burchard didn't try to become the next Tony Robbins, even though it would be very easy for him to, because they both wear suits. They're both high energy. Like, he could easily try to say, I'm just going to become the next one of him. I would say Brendan maybe even takes it up a notch over Tony as far as energy. And having said that, Brendan totally embraces his inner dork. He tells people when you go to his event, I'm a dork and I know it and I love it. And people in the audience are saying, I love that he's a dork and I'm a dork too and all this kind of stuff. But a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, high performance coach, I won't say her name, but she does some stuff with Jack Canfield. I mean, she's performing at a high level and she trains people. And she goes, I can't even watch that guy for 1 minute. He's just like, he's too geeky and too something for me. These are her words. And the point I'm getting at is Brendan did okay, despite the fact that my friend finds him too geeky and dorky.
Again, it's Cherry Garcia or fudge toffee. We all have our own flavors.
Yeah, and if you watch this, and I think this would be a good lesson for people in this area we're talking about, is go to a high-level event like a Brendan Burchard High Performance Academy, but go to the ones, he has one called Influencer that I went to, where he has like 20 influencers come on a stage. Everybody from Rachel Hollis to Lewis House and on and on. And Tom Bilyeu is another one. And you go there and watch them. And the thing that you're going to notice from a mile away is each time a new one comes up, these people are nothing like the other one. Like they don't even feel like the same speaker. And yet you're looking at the high level of speakers, and 20 of them all seem uniquely their own. For those that maybe know Eric Thomas, he was there. And Eric Thomas, are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not.
You need to check him out. He's the guy that he's so aggressive, but he's called the hip hop preacher. And he's so aggressive, but in a way that you're like, he's magnetism. You just have to listen to him. But he says stuff like, and he's very aggressive with the audience. Like, what does he say? You want my result, but you don't want my grind. You don't want to do the grind it took to get there. You just want what I have now. And then he really rips that apart for like 10 minutes. My point is, Eric gets on the stage. There's nobody else that was on the stage like Eric Thomas. And yet, Brendan gets on the stage and has just as much of an impact as Eric, even though he's a different speaker. And so I think the best way to see that is go to a live event with different world-class speakers and go, wait a minute, I shouldn't try to be one of them because they're not trying to be each other. And I just wanted to add that because that's where I was able to, when I started sharing that, people are like, I never thought of it that way before. And I would say, look, I'll send you 10 videos. And I'm going to tell you the foundations they're doing, the methods, the tips that you're going to be able to see from speaker to speaker they are doing. But then what I want you to watch is their energy and who they are, and they're totally different. I did that with Lisa Nichols and Steve Jobs. They couldn't be more different than each other. However, after I'd showed them the mechanics of speaking, they could see they're doing like 10 things the same. They're both speaking in threes. They count the threes out, and yet they're doing it in a completely different way. Steve Jobs would walk the stage, and you felt his passion, even though he was very monotone. Lisa's like on the stage, hitting the stage, feeling the emotions like you'd feel like she's a drama student.
Yeah.
And I have harbored this point or labored this point quite a bit, but I know we're definitely on the same page here. But I really feel people need to be the first John Smith or whatever your name is.
I love it. Thank you. Absolutely.
I didn't mean to go that far into it, but I got on a soapbox.
I love it. No, it's so true. People need to hear this, right? So that they can trust that who they are is enough.
Well, and I wanted to shift a little bit. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to shift a little bit as well, Tricia, to your podcast. And I should even ask, I shouldn't assume anything. Is it still running?
Yes. I just refreshed the podcast this week. New music, a new intro. I am opening the kimono. It's my first solo cast in 3 years. And I literally talk about what it was like to live in New York City during COVID and with Broadway shutting down and all of the things. So yeah, I decided the big talk is not the small talk. So it's time to go a little deeper.
Wow. So now so it's going to be solo, you said. So is it going to be you all the time?
I'm going to alternate between solo and guests. So next week I've got a guest, but this week is my first solo episode in about 3 years.
And is that when you said so the big talk going deeper, is you're still going to be talking about speaking and stages? Just so ish. Okay.
I do ask 5 questions. The 5 fast talk at the end is all about like, who's your favorite speaker? What's your favorite book? But I am talking more about influence, leadership, using your voice, how using your voice can have an impact in the world. So it's bigger than just speaking and stages.
And now you talked about your stage going live for a year and then all of a sudden being forced to go virtual. Can you talk about that experience a bit? Because this ties into what you're saying in the podcast about COVID and what it's forced to happen. What did that look like? And I'm curious because it's something I'm exploring. But I haven't watched it yet, so I can watch it and then ask this question. But since I won't be able to see it in real time right now, do you have the speakers that are taking the stage on your stage? Are they actually standing up speaking to the audience, or is it more of an interview style or a webinar? Or I'm just curious how that looks because I know TEDx feels now to me a little bit more like a webinar almost when I watch TEDx now. Many of them are.
It sort of depends on the producer. When I was producing Speakers Who Dare, which is what I produced when I moved on from TEDx Lincoln Square, it was a live event at a theater in New York City. It was a theatrical academia. So there was Broadway performers, music, all the stuff. It was a show. We then moved into 2020, 2019, hundreds of speakers applied. I chose 20 to each give 8-minute talks over a period of a day at the theater. So they start working with me in September. The show is March 24th. Everybody's rehearsing. Yeah, everybody's rehearsing. Everybody's excited. I've created videos about everybody. It's all ready to go. And March hits. We don't know what's happening. Very uncertain and chaotic in New York City. And on March 12th, Broadway closed. So I took a walk around the block. We weren't wearing masks yet. We didn't know anything except Broadway closed. And I thought, I have to make a decision not based on ego. Do I shut down the event? Do I postpone the event? Do I just cancel the event? And I thought, wait a minute, I'm a filmmaker. I will keep everyone where they are, safe and sound. I will give them direction on how to shoot their talk, and I'll edit it together into a feature film that we will live stream. So I live streamed the feature film of Speakers Who Dare, and we went from being able to serve 150 people at a theater to 150 countries. And I had them shoot it in different ways. One of my speakers, I said, I want you to give this talk with a friend like you're having tea. And I want your camera up to be over the shoulder of your friend. So just have a conversation with your friend. And that's how I want you to shoot it. I had another speaker go to the park, and she lied on her stomach looking at the camera, and all we saw were the trees behind her. So I directed each of these so that they would be very interesting ways of speaking and performing. So that's what I did for Speakers Who Dare. For the virtual showcase, I asked my speakers to stand, and they deliver live on a Zoom call for feedback. So there's a lot of ways that you can produce a virtual speaking event that can still have the kind of impact you want in terms of reaching your audience. Now, there's nothing like being in a room with people and having that energetic exchange for sure. And I know that I will probably burst into tears the next time I'm on stage and I can actually feel the energy of an audience. But right now, we can have the kind of impact as long as the message is on point and we understand how to deliver it.
So now I have to ask you, that video that you put together, is that on your or on our website where people can check that out?
I do not think it's still available because it was a one-time offer. I think we ended up selling the whole 4-hour event for like $12. But yeah, it's in the past. It's one of those things that is just like a Zen sand sculpture. You take a lot of time to make that mandala with all the sand, like the monks, and then you just wash it away.
Okay, fair enough. And like I said, I want to ask you this because right now I'm in between of the two of those things, meaning our live events. We had two we had to move. Strangely enough, we were able to actually run two of them during COVID.
Wow.
Heavily restricted at universities, but our big thing was getting the talks filmed.
Yeah.
And we were still able to have one of the events. I think we were allowed 56 people in the room, let's say total. But we had 12 speakers, so, run the numbers back, and then the filmmaker, like the two people filming and all that. So, I mean, I think we had like 25 people that could watch it. It's still enough if you're it's a small room, so it's still enough to feel like it feels like there's whatever the room size is, it's full. Yeah. And we're not filming the audience, so it worked. But I'm in that in between phase, kind of waiting it out, saying how soon are the events going to come back? Because we got the two that were the biggest factor. One was in New York, of course, and one was in Boston at Harvard. Yeah. And so both of those got moved to the fall, and fingers crossed is basically where I'm at now. The New York one's at Columbia University. So it's going to be a great experience if we can get there. And I'm just crossing my fingers because we can't control what's going to happen. I have another one in Toronto in the fall, which is more likely to happen. And then because like Toronto right now is on lockdown, but there's a lot of things that make it look like by fall, it's quite a whiles away, we might be okay. So I'm still planning for the live events, which is why I haven't fully shifted. So that's why this event feels more like an interview and a conversation, because I see them as two separate things. But I'm still on the fence of what if I have to merge them? And then what I was thinking, to your point now, I didn't think about, because I'm not a filmmaker, so I didn't think about the point, which I think is cool, about having them filmed in different ways. But I definitely wanted people to get on a stage locally in their town. I wanted to direct them how to do that, get on local stage. Maybe we even hire the film person for them, maybe a local independent filmmaker, and get it filmed at each one. And then have it just like as if you're almost like we're coming from 8 different countries or whatever. Yeah. And you're seeing the speakers live, but not sitting down talking like this, more standing up, speaking to an audience. If I have to do that, that's what I want to do. So I was curious what you ended up doing.
It's absolutely possible. And you can direct your speakers to deliver to the camera so that it's as if they're speaking at a theater and no one's there, and you can live stream it, or you can cut it together and have a complete virtual speaking event that is not a conversation or a fireside chat.
I love it. I love what you said you did too about the over the shoulder thing. I think that's so cool. Like just the conversation with a friend, and I love that style of filmmaking anyway. It feels like a documentary film, but I think that's so cool that you did that rather than say, well, I guess it's a wash. And so now, are you planning with that event in particular? Will there? Like, I know it's no crystal ball, but if we come back, let's say, to live events in 10 months or 12 months, are you planning to put that event on live at some point, or is that sand gone down, like you said, down in the water now?
I'm definitely going to be producing the Big Talk Live, and there will be Broadway performers. There will be a massive celebration. The Big Talk Live will be happening most likely in 2022 because I want it to be a huge event. And come fall in New York, we might still have a limitation on how many people in the audience. And I am very, very conscious of people's health and safety. And I'm not going to do an event until everyone is safe, and this is way behind us.
And so just before we ask you how we can learn more, I wanted to ask with the Big Talk, because I'm sure I always try to think for the person watching this, what's the question they want me to ask that I didn't ask or I left unasked? So first of all, in the podcast, you mentioned that you're still running it and you're doing alternating between guests and not having guests. So people listening to this, of course, are wanting to get podcast interviews or they're launching their own. So the first question, and I'll put two of them together, is do you still look for guests specifically for the show, or is it now, is it people that you already know through your network, or like, is there still that option of people becoming a guest down the road? And then secondly, for the Big Talk, will you do applications again for people to speak there, or are the spots already gone because you had to postpone it?
Great questions. You can absolutely reach out to me if you're interested in being a guest on the Big Talk podcast. And you can find me at triciabrouk.com. And you can see my name here. It's thatname.com. And the Big Talk Academy is actually opening up for applications currently. So if you want to apply to speak on my virtual showcase, you can go to thebigtalkacademy.com. And the Big Talk Live, keep in touch with me, because when those applications open up, you're going to want to be on that stage. And speaking at the Big Talk Live is also a massive visibility platform for you, because I produce the show. So it's going to be an opportunity for you to get in front of a lot of amazing people in New York City.
And you said Big Talk Academy and then Big Talk Live. Is that a separate website?
The Big Talk Live hasn't been created yet because it's going to be brand new. So you can find everything you'll need at triciabrouk.com for sure. And be sure to follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram.
Tricia, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. As you know, I appreciate you. I think the world of you. You are the real deal. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that often. And so it is 100% sincere. So thank you for doing all the great work you're doing. I did put your website and the Big Talk Academy website in the comments. We get a lot of people watching the replay later that comment on it. And so I always like to put it there, because that way they'll see it. If they're listening, they can just go over to there and click and check it out. One of the great things about social media and doing this online is they can literally just click on the link on Facebook and go right to your page.
Amazing.
So I would recommend people that want to get into speaking, want to learn the craft of speaking, you are a go-to person. So visit Tricia, seek her out, connect with her, say hi. And Tricia, this has been an absolute pleasure. And with your permission, I'll call it a to be continued.
To be continued for sure, Corey. Thank you so much for always asking me, and I'm always going to say yes.
You're so kind. Thank you, my friend. We'll let you run and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll spread the word and wave the flag.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
And we're going to bring our next guest right on. I want to bring them right in because we have 5 guests today, so I want to make sure we maximize our time. And my co-host may join us, so don't get surprised if somebody jumps on later. She had to rush off for another thing, and she's coming back. Antonia and Greg, so excited to have you here today. It's been a while since we last saw you. My first question, which is maybe the most important, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Absolutely, I can.
All right.
Woohoo!
That's always the most important thing, because nothing happens unless you can.
It is a big deal sometimes. Like 10 minutes ago when we went online, there was no online.
No internet today. Perfect Mercury retrograde experience.
And now I have to say, again, I don't want to jinx us, but you guys are coming through like as clear as any guest we've had all week. And my side is clear, so I'm just gonna cross the fingers.
Right.
Sides, right?
Cool here because we're on our cell, and luckily we have a cell tower. We're 10 miles out in the country, but half a mile away, we have a cell tower.
So
You know what's amazing is we had somebody yesterday on who trying to remember where he's at, but he's on a little island somewhere in the world. I can't remember exactly where he's at, and there's no, like, all there is in the whole town is cell service. That's it. Is that like you guys as well?
that's how it was until about 5 years ago. We used to have to go up the hill and climb on a rock to get our cell service. But then since we're way out in the country, we had everyone chipped in money and we got broadband. So we all have broadband, but the whole transistor went down this morning. So
Oh, wow.
we're like, what the heck? And then we're like, well, we need to go somewhere. And we're like, no, okay, let's try the phone. And so the cell tower still worked. And
funny, I have to say this before we jump right in, is you mentioned going to the top of the hill and to get cell service. And I think of, I don't know if those commercials were aired everywhere, but I think of the commercial with the guy walking and he's going, can you hear me yet? Can you hear me yet? How about now? How about now? And ultimately he's walking up to the top of a mountain to eventually, like, he gets to the top of the mountain. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you perfectly now. Great. And then it's like, then he can't hear you again. Yeah. Actually, I think that one he's like even standing on his toes. Like,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, so that's what makes me think.
We needed those selfie sticks back then just for
Yeah, just for the connection to get higher on the mountain. So, having said all that, where we usually start, I'll step backwards a step now. Where we usually start is we usually get the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves, and that way then we'll dive in deeper, so you don't have to worry about how much you share or how little you share, but it's just a great way for you to tell a little bit of your story. So maybe I'll let you guys take it away. I know you're both masters at deciding who's going to say what when, and you're used to doing the dual interview. So I'll let you decide which route you want to go or who wants to speak first. But can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
And what you don't see on your end is when we go like this, then the other person says, "Oh no, you go ahead."
That's awesome.
So we're a really live thing. So it's like, what are we going to talk about? So yeah, it's really cool. And Corey, thank you for having us here. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. One of the things that we love about our business and life, and I love the business, life, and the universe, because that's our jam every day, is how people are in business and how it's affecting their life and how their life is affecting their business and how the universe whirls that whole thing up. And then they come to us and they say, Greg, Antonia, what am I supposed to do? I can't get my landing page done. I can't get my speech done. For whatever reason, I'm watching cat videos. I'm procrastinating. So our thing is to both teach people how to get out of that, and also working with them one-on-one to figure out how to step away from the things that are distracting them in life and get focused so that they can really get to their vision, so they can, bring that vision in their unique way. It's just so fun. We have fun every day. We get to the end of the day and we think, how the heck can we be so lucky to work with wonderful people and, be moving people along? So that's what we do.
And we've been doing this work for
25 years.
25 years, being energetic healers. And we started on a real body. We're still doing body-based stuff, but we did symptomatic stuff, headaches and allergies and, stomach aches, all of that, cancer, everything. We worked on things in the body and how things that have happened in the past and the stress level and all of that come together to create all of these symptomatic things that once we dive into what was happening, it turns out that there was some very difficult or adverse experience at the beginning point, at the core issue of why that dis-ease started. And so for 15, 20 years, we were working on very symptomatic body ailments. And we realized, oh my gosh, when we had a real turning point in our lives with taking care of our elders who were getting older and getting sick and dying, as well as having teenage girls, and sometimes that was pretty rough also. And we realized that, oh my gosh, as all of these adverse things were happening to us, how that affected our business and how we would wake up exhausted and distracted because of all the things that were going on around us, and not realizing that it was actually tanking our business, right? Having to deal with all of this stuff and not being able to concentrate and being tired and being stressed and distracted. And so we realized that, oh my gosh, we have to apply all of these healing techniques that we've been doing for headaches and allergies and heart, high blood pressure, and apply them to this distraction and this adverse experiences that were happening in the moment, not just in the past. And so we started doing that. It was like, oh my gosh, this is a whole different way of looking at it, really. And so we've brought the whole body base, so mind, body, and spirit, into the healing work, so that people can now get out of that procrastination and distraction and
get out of their heads.
Get out of their heads, right? And get more
their bodies and get stuff done.
Get it aligned, get all of your being working together so that you can go for those big goals, those big talks, all the things you get out of your comfort zone, to do. And then all of a sudden you run into all of these fearful things that perhaps happened in the past.
So it's so cool because this week we've been kind of jumping various different methodologies around influence, around how to get your message out through podcasting, speaking, writing. I mean, that's kind of the areas where we've been focused on. But what I said this to Kelly, my co-host, earlier, is that almost everybody brings something new to the table. And it's kind of neat when you talk about marketing books, how you could have 10 people bring something you never heard somebody else already say. And what I love, and I mean, I want to go to the podcasting side of things with you guys and other areas, but I think another part that we forget with influencers often is the self-care side and healing. So, I mean, it's one thing to say, here's a way to crush it with your podcast. Here's how you can get more speaking gigs. Here's how you can write a book and actually market it and sell a book, which is as hard as writing it. But the other side is, what are you doing to take care of yourself so that you can keep doing that, and that when you're doing it, you're most effective? And so I love that you guys focus so much on self-care and taking care of ourselves. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I saw it on the website, and I thought I want to make sure I mention this to them, is Lomi Lomi Massage. And I didn't know what that was 3 years ago. And now I have a person here where we live on the island who does Lomi Lomi Massage. And I haven't had anything other than Lomi Lomi Massage since the first day I had Lomi Lomi Massage, meaning I don't book an appointment anywhere else. And it's actually challenging for me right now because she's taking a 2-week study break. And so it's my first time. I'm going to go 3 weeks other than when I was traveling without my Lomi Lomi. So, but I guess, can you tell us what Lomi Lomi is? Because again, I had no idea it even existed until she introduced me to it.
Yeah, and I came upon Lomi Lomi in '95 after being on a massage journey, doing massage. I started doing massage when I was 12. So I didn't come on to Lomi Lomi until I was a little bit older. I was like, 37. And it was like a life-changing thing to me. And as I started to learn it, I studied with 2 masters who are incredible teachers.
Hawaiian
masters. And they wanted so much to be experts at what they did. So they were Lomi Lomi experts. They both became chiropractors so that they could really have that thing where they were like, okay, I've studied everything about the body. And they both went back to Lomi Lomi because it's so effective. When you talk to elders, there was a group of elders who met in Hawaii, in Waikiki years ago and not on the Big Island, oh my goodness, on Oahu. And they met just so that they could define what it is, because they didn't want other people to define it for them. And what they came up with is Lomi Lomi is a loving touch deep to the bones where the soul vibrates.
Wow.
It's really part of that whole Hawaiian tradition of healing, which includes hula, which includes the ho'oponopono and the lomi. And that is how their society worked for thousands of years, right? And it was all the self-care, how they interacted with each other, you know, and how everything worked together. So it was a foundation. What we see is self-care, and was a foundation of their society.
It's just what they did.
It's what they did. That's what makes it so cool, right?
Yeah, she was telling me that, and you, I mean, I don't know who she studied with or how deep she studied it, but she was telling me that in the traditional Lomi Lomi, the massage could go on for hours and hours until the person was healed. Like, in other words, it wasn't like I shouldn't say that way, but she said some people, when they were practicing it early on, they wouldn't stop, like, oh, you have an hour appointment, so we're done in an hour. Like she said, it could be 8 people working, or not 8, but I don't know, 6 people working on you for like 4 or 5 hours. Is there some truth to that?
There's quite a bit of truth to that. One of my teachers, when I asked, what was the longest massage that you did? He said it was 4 days. 4 days. And he was working on, and this was not a long time ago. This was, it was around 98 or 99. There was the priests, Hawaiian traditional priests are called a kahu. And the kahu, who was in charge of, on the Big Island just south of Kealakekua Bay, is the sacred area there. And he was dying, and Dane Silva, one of my Lomi masters, he wanted to make sure that his body was prepared. And one of the rituals was this 4-day massage. And he said, yeah, we did eat lunch. And, we talked story and had a good time.
Wow.
But 4 days, he wanted to make sure that all the fluids in his body, nothing was stuck, that things were moving, so that he could transcend in a way where his bones would have the mana of his life. And they'd be able to take those bones, and in a very traditional way, they bury them actually in the reef there. So it's quite amazing.
Wow.
A little bit after that. And it's amazing when you are in a culture like that has vision. So our work is all about creating vision, and then what's in the way of you being able to fulfill that vision. So it's a really key part of our work is people getting in alignment. And alignment is what Ho'oponopono, all those out there who have heard that word many times, it really means get aligned. And it's really what our work is all about, is using the body and the meridians and the energy system and the chakras to find this alignment, so that when you go to do your thing, people are like, wow, you're amazing. I want to come and do it with you, whatever it is.
Really helping you fill yourself with you, and not all the stuff that you were taught or, impressed upon when you were a kid, or that people forced you into. We help people get rid of all that stuff so that they can become their own unique self, their unique voice, and bring that out into the world unimpeded, so that they shine so bright that your customers are like, whoa, I want that.
Undeniable.
That's what I want. And they're just drawn right to you.
So before I move into the podcast, I want to talk to you about that. I want to ask you then on the same note, because when we talk about health and self-care, I mean, everybody's looking for answers. And so I think maybe the best way I could get like a, what's your best strategy type answer is to ask you, what habits do you have every day? Are there some specific habits that you have every day to make sure you're caring for yourself?
So I think the most important thing is the question, not so much the answer, but the question. If you have the questions, so that they're just a piece of your tool chest. What question am I going to ask myself this morning? So the first question that we ask ourselves, we look at each other in the morning, we say, meditate? Yes, let's meditate. Go for a walk? Yes, let's go for a walk. So these are the questions. And if our day is such that, so like this morning, short walk. And the meditation was, oh, no internet. Okay, we'll just do our little meditation. The silent meditation. So it's like, then when you get into your day, the answers come when you ask questions. The answers will not come if you don't ask questions. So it's like when you're going to do You know, when you're going to go and do a talk. Like yesterday, we were on a summit, and we were thinking, okay, what are we going to talk about? And then we looked on the summit thing, and they'd already made something up for us that was interesting. We thought, I don't know if we really want to talk about that. And so we kind of just switched it as we got into the summit, and it really aligned with what they were doing. And so the question was, is that the right thing for us, really? No. Let's just kind of steer it a little bit differently. So questions are so important, because now here's the thing is, we know the answers, but we just have to ask the question, then we have to listen. And that alignment with our intuition, the wherever that's coming from, and you know, getting to where you can start to feel like I can trust that gut intuition that I have. That is the challenge. So that's the getting all the mind trying to, as we go through each moment, your mind is trying to figure out what's going to happen. It's trying to predict, am I going to be safe? What do I have to tell my owner? What do I have to show them as far as the memories of things that look like this? So it's like clearing all of that out and allowing your body and the energetic alignment of where you're going to give you that direction, and then to follow the advice of your deep, deep, deep knowing soul and spirit.
Yeah. So just to kind of cap that one, because asking the question is so important, and we have those rituals that we ask about. So we always now especially we're trying to get some good sleep, 7 or 8 hours at least of sleep every night. We meditate every day. We walk every day. We eat really good food every day. And we have some coffee, and we have, so we do all sorts of things, but we try and do them in moderation. Mm-hmm. And breathing is the other thing, is you got to breathe. And if you breathe with intention, it makes your whole life clearer.
Yeah. So I love that, because it's both sides of the answer, asking those right questions, but also having a base that you're asking those questions about as well. And I figured meditation had to be in there. And I feel like that should be a glaring hint for people, that somebody who's helping other people get aligned is meditating, but also just the lesson we've done since this event started. I was trying to figure it out the other day, but we're probably over 100 interviews. And the most common, if you ask about habits, the most common thing that people say, regardless of what field they're in or industry, is meditation. Some people do it for 5 minutes. Some people say, I do it when I walk my dog. Some people sit down, cross-legged, meditate. But meditation, I would say, is the most common answer. And if I think back to my 6,500 interviews, so that's no small number, I would say second to finding your purpose, I would say second to that now is probably make sure you make time to meditate or sit in silence or be silent or be by yourself for a bit. And so, I think there's a glaring lesson there that whatever meditation means to you, there's something to it. And it's not new age. It's been, I love how we say new age on this stuff that's been around longer than anything new age.
Exactly. And if you really want to find your purpose, that's where you find it, in your meditation. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that the meditation allows all of your creativity, all of your innermost desires to come up, because you're getting your brain out of the way is the point of meditation, right? And it's, if we have our brain in the way, if we live from here up, we're going to be in that same rabbit hole all the time. We're going to go to where we've always gone in our thoughts before. I forget who said it, but the same brain that got you into this is not the one that's going to get you out of it, right? And that's
Einstein.
I think it was Einstein.
Kind of smart guy.
And so it's meditation is all about retraining your brain, and that's what our jam is all about, by also helping the body heal, so that then the body can send your brain signals that says, well, actually, I don't need to have that. I don't need to go to that fear response anymore. I don't need to go to that anger response. So brain, actually, you can start doing some more new neural pathways to have a different response when you come upon this unknown situation.
So two things I want to touch on there, and then I'm going to jump into podcasting as promised. But one thing, when you mentioned about the mess, the brain that got you into this mess can't get, that what it made me think of is Stephen Covey. And I know most of his book he would credit to other people he learned from, but Stephen Covey had a thing in his book that I always was so profound to me, that I always thought was summed it up so perfectly. He said something to the effect of, unless you change from the person you were who created the mess, you can never fix the mess. And I'm paraphrasing, but same idea. Like, you have to, he basically was saying you have to evolve from who made the mess to fix it. And so it always makes me think of that. But the second thing is more of a behind the curtain story. But Jack Canfield talked about spending 4 months trying to come up with the title for Chicken Soup for the Soul. And they threw every title at the wall and nothing was just sitting right. Him and Mark Victor Hansen and the publisher, they were just, every day it was like, they said almost like a battle trying to get this title. And, we all know it's easier, less is more, and you have to release to let it come. But what happened ultimately for him was he was meditating one day. And he said while he was meditating, I forget what he said first came in. It was like close, but it was like, I'm just going to use an example. Like it could have been like clam chowder, or something like that. But whatever it was, it came. And then he just kept working on it. No, that's not right. But he was meditating while he was doing this. And then he said, then it just popped into his head. And as soon as he did, he said normally he would finish his meditation, but he couldn't. He got too excited. He jumped up. He called Mark Victor Hansen and said, I got the title. It's this. And Mark said, that's the title. And he said both of them then got on a conference call back in the day, called the publisher, said, we got the title. Told him, he said, that's the title. Done. And he said, I don't know to this day if that ever would have come to me without me being in meditation and being in silence and letting things come to me rather than trying to force it. So that's the power of meditation to me. So I love that you said that, in your meditation, is when you're going to have your greatest discoveries, and you're going to find your purpose, and those things are going to show themselves. And so I've been teasing it for a bit now about circling around to the podcast. But correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a podcast. Do you have a podcast?
No, we don't have a podcast.
For some reason,
yeah, we're actually working on getting one.
What should we name it?
What's that? Sorry.
He said, "What should we name it?"
What should we name? Oh, that's a good question.
We better meditate.
For some reason, I'll tell you where I thought I checked out an interview. I was doing some research, and it must have been somebody else's podcast, but it had your guys' names listed at the top, like you guys were running it. And I knew you didn't before, but I thought for some reason they must have launched one. So
we're getting there.
We're actually thinking of doing, since we've been married for 36 years. And we knew each other, so we've known each other for 42 years. We actually are thinking of doing something on relationships.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah, you guys have achieved something that few people do. And so I feel like that always, there's always people that want to learn from somebody who've been able to achieve something that most people don't. And I say that, it's not, it's more just a fact. What's the percentage of divorces and the numbers of, what are the numbers that make it past 5 years, 10 years? And we know they get very small as you get more into those years. And so I feel like it's something that a lot of people could use.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we're getting there.
Well,
when we hit 50, no.
But do you both know who John Lee Dumas is? Entrepreneurs on Fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him this week, I in an earlier interview, I said, what's the secret sauce or the secret? And I said, I know you hate that question, I'm sure, because everybody hates that question, because everything we do, there's always simpler ways to do stuff than we make it and all that other stuff. But to try to distill everything into one answer, especially something like running a podcast. And I thought, okay, he's going to say to me, Corey, you can't give one answer, but I'll give you, one will get you on the path or something. He said, no, I'll give you the one secret. And I feel like what you just said, the secret he revealed ties into why you should do what you just said about the relationship thing. He said, if you can figure out the one problem that a lot of people have that you can solve easier than anybody else or better than anybody else, and in some cases that nobody else is trying to solve, but better than anybody else, and you do it better than anybody else, that's the secret to success in any endeavor. And so I of course, immediately flipped the script on him and said, okay, so what were you solving with Entrepreneurs on Fire? And he said, I was solving the fact that I had burned through every podcast I could find, and there were no new episodes. And I couldn't find a daily podcast to listen to on the way to work. So he said, I'm going to create the daily podcast. And he said, the great part about that is the day he launched, it was the worst show that ever existed, daily on business. And it was also the best show because it was the only one. Oh. He said nobody else was doing it, and to do it daily takes a lot of discipline. And he said, so it's another part of it is most people won't do it. Even if they try, they'll give up. And so he said that's what helped us survive and succeed, because we were solving a problem I knew I had and other people had to have, and we were doing it in a way that nobody else was. And of course, he said, it's not always going to be the case nobody else is doing, but just do it better than they're doing it. Yeah. And so a big problem that a lot of people have is how to make relationships work. So I think you're onto something there. That's the takeaway from that.
Yeah. And I think what's cool about it is we have worked with couples before, and it doesn't work to work with them at the same time because they each have their own set of life that comes with them. And that life, it doesn't really mingle with the other one when it comes to healing. It's like, you can't tell somebody, hey, could you just help your husband heal, please? It's like, and that's not a good thing in a relationship, for you to try to be the one who is going to fix the other person.
Well, that's true.
So where we really find, when people come to us and they say, it's my husband's the problem. I just don't know what to do about it. Oh, okay. So how do you feel? How do you feel? What's going on with you?
Right. It's all about working within your own hula hoop. But the cool thing is about sorry for interrupting.
That's okay.
Oh, it happens once in a while. But we totally look at what's happening in here and how that manifests out there. And so we teach people how to talk to their body, how to ask the question, like Greg was saying, it's the questions that are so important. But what's really cool about having couples doing it together, we teach people how to heal themselves. And when you're with a partner who knows you better than anyone else, that partner can also do the work with you, and you can do it with each other, because we see our long-term partners see each other more clearly than most other people do, right? So when he's like all grumpy or something and he's just he does that. And I'm like, well, honey, maybe you should like run your liver meridian or something. And he's like, and then he does it, and it's like, oh, so couples can be the reminder and the helper for the other person. Not that they can heal them necessarily, but they can aid in the process. Yes, be the witness.
You get to be the witness of what either they can't see or they don't want to look at.
Yeah.
And then it's the kindness and, really feeling into, how to give that slight bit of direction, which is, exactly as Antonia said, honey, you seem a little upset, and then sometimes, and it's part of our process, because it happens, right? When you're in your day, all of a sudden you're hosed. It's like, now I'm not writing that thing that I need to have done in half an hour. Mm-hmm. And you don't have a half an hour or another day to figure it out. So if you can have a process that within a couple minutes, you're back on track, and our body has that intelligence. Yeah. It's so amazing. And I love what you said about ancient wisdom. And I love everything that we are so ancient about all the tools that we use, because it's the stuff that's been proven. And I get a lot of my information from National Geographic because they deal with ancient stuff a lot of the time. And one of the coolest things I ever saw, and it gave me this whole kind of global vision of how healing was 4,000 and 5,000 years ago, because they found a mummy in Egypt, and it had tattoos of all of the meridian points. They were doing that in China at the same time. Isn't that amazing?
It so is. I mean, to me, it's amazing in general that all these principles and fundamentals and foundations have been around for almost, let's just call it forever. And yet we still want to keep trying to recreate and try to find a new quick fix. And it's almost like the shiny object thing, right? We want to chase a new shiny object when the answer is right there.
Exactly. And that's the jam, is the answer is right there. You just maybe need a little help tweaking how to get to it.
Well, and you know, I was going to say too, I'm looking at a book right here that if you're in business and you want to succeed, this book is the only book, I'm going to explain which book it is, but the only book you'll ever need. And it was written in 1937. And there were other ones, of course, for somebody else that would give you that same answer. And yet we're still rewriting new books because we either have to rediscover it, we have to learn the new lesson, or somebody else's perspective reaches us better. But it's just interesting how the foundation. So the book I'm talking about is Think and Grow Rich.
Right.
I mean, and for anybody who hasn't read it, it's not about money at the heart of it. It might seem, I mean, named it that, I think, because it was near the Great Depression, and that would be an easy way to get people to buy a book. But what it's about is it's actually making you rich as a person. And I mean, it goes into meditation in it. It goes into visualization. It goes into having a mastermind group, like all those things that still work today. But again, we're almost 100 years later, and there's people that'll discover either that book or that knowledge today and go, wow, we should have known this long ago. Well, we did, but we weren't doing it. So the same thing you mentioned about how wild is that they were doing the same thing in two different places without realizing it. And here we are still learning about it today.
Yeah. And thank God for books. And because a lot of the traditions, like in Hawaii, they're, you know, in our kind of modern new age culture of healing, especially, we look at things and we say, I was trained to be a lion kahuna, or you know, whatever. I went to the 3-day thing and then I followed up with a 2-month thing and I got my certification. Kahuna does not exist anymore. We just have to see it as a reality that was a cultural norm in a society that had this structure that does not exist anymore. Yeah. And that we have to see that wisdom and that tradition was created to bring us to this moment. And in this moment, we take the wisdom of that tradition and we weave it into the culture that we have now. And this is different. We've had a number of generations where people have died. I actually was so fortunate. I got to see kind of the end of that kahuna stage where people were dying. And if you went to them and said, are you a kahuna? They'd say, no, I am not. My grandfather, my grandmother, my uncle, they were kahuna, but I am not.
They would never name themselves that.
And everybody called them kahuna, but they didn't have that thing where they started at 7. Some of them had it, but the culture was already, and the society was already mixed up enough that it wasn't aligned to give that generation to generation expert born, teaches the next expert, teaches. But now we have traditions that are being taught through multicultural ways. And we're so fortunate to be in this world now where we can mix it up. We can be online like this talking. People can say, wow, I want to know more about that. And they can dive in. And what I love about the aspects of all this is that it takes it from this kind of driven, aligned, I'm born, I do this, to, ooh, I'm kind of unique. I think I have a vision of what I want in life. And then on the path of discovery. And now we go and we start to discover this cool stuff. And wow, there's the teacher. Wow, there's the stuff. Look at what it did for me. Now I'm going to go help other people with it. We're at such a kind of fundamental advantage of being able to pick and choose to fit our unique way that we are, each of us.
Well, even on that point, Greg, we're also where we can choose when we want to tune in and how we want to tune in and when we want to listen. I mean, we're in such a world on demand now. And to the point where traditional TV shows are getting, you know, 1/10 of the ratings they would have gotten 10 years ago. And so you think, well, nobody's paying attention, but it's very possible in certain circumstances of that they're getting a bigger audience. They're actually getting more people. I mean, our new challenge becomes, like if I use that example, they can't monetize it. So for example, if they had a show that we were watching and 10 million people were watching, then the advertisers were wanting to pay for that spot. Now they have 1 million people watching, and they might have 15 million people watching online, but they're watching online for free.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the new challenge, but it's still amazing to think we have so much more opportunity to watch that stuff, so many more ways. And the truth is, what's amazing is we can even choose to watch it without commercials. Like, it's amazing that technology is allowing us to do that. The new challenge is going to be always I don't mean monetize it for the sake of making money, but I mean, there's got to be an ecosystem where, at some point, it can't be just always for free, always.
Right. We know a lot of musicians, and we're musicians ourselves, and people who write songs, and they're having a huge problem right now because they have spent their entire lives writing. We have a neighbor who's a hit songwriter, and he gets Spotify, a $15 check. You can't live on that. We have to be able to support, like you said, that ecosystem that supports the artists, that supports the writers, the podcasters, that are putting all of this information out there that we're consuming on a huge basis for free, and we have to be able to support that creativity at the same time.
Yeah. And, to that end, I mean, I have likewise great friends that are musicians that are struggling now because on top of what you just said, what they were able to do is get those live gigs and make money.
Right.
And now they've been hit twice because the streaming thing every day, that gets harder because, like you said, the checks get smaller or they don't exist. And then on top of that, what they were doing was going to the live side to make the money. And now that's even a struggle. Like, I have a friend, her last album she put it out as a CD. And, she said, she has 4 CDs out. And she said the difference between the first CD and the fourth CD in sales, I mean, you couldn't even compare them. And the irony of it is the fourth CD, she was 5 times as big. She had 5 times as many followers, but made less money because nobody's buying CDs. And then, so add that to the fact that, okay, well, then she said, I still sold CDs at the live shows. I made some money there and I got paid for the live show. Well, now with COVID, she's been, because of where we live, it's a little more open than most places, but she's like getting, 2-3 live gigs every 4 months, and then doing some online where she's getting paid a little bit to do them, but she would get paid more if she was there in person. And so it's, the amount of money she would bring in, I would think in a 12-month period now would be a tenth of what she'd normally make.
Absolutely.
Like, how do you live like that?
No, it's true.
So, but there is a flip side to this also when it comes to like what we do in this business self-development kind of world, is that this has given us an opportunity for people to really learn and be able to use our tools. So we've actually been doing a lot of things where we give a lot away when we're speaking and doing trainings, and do a 3-day event that was normally for our paid community, and charge $47 for something that's worth thousands of dollars.
Right.
And basically training people, come and hang out with us for 3 days and learn how to do this thing that we charge people a bunch of money to do. But the beauty is that it allows people to align with what they need, so they can really see it. And our business has actually grown exponentially in this time because people have been able to experience what we do in a deep way, and then say, wow, that really worked. I want it. What do I do now? And the what do I do now is our favorite question, because then all we have to do is ask in their vision of what they want in life, what do you want? How are you going to get there? What support do you need? And then it's just like stunning to them that they realize that they have all the answers and they just need a guide. They need a mentor to be able to pull them through that area where they're stuck. And it sounds weird.
Where it's difficult.
Where it's difficult, where they can't see themselves. They can see the vision, but they can't quite see how they're going to get there. And once they see that, then they get all excited and life changes quickly.
And I assume at some point in that case, they say, well, I need to work with you guys directly. So I assume it leads to something, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, obviously, it's like everything. I'm sure it's a diminishing amount. Like it's, like if there was 100 people that took the route that financially was easier to afford, there might be 5 that say, well, I need to work with you one-on-one.
Right.
I'm sure that happens. And to circle back to music for a sec, it's a great point you just made, because I have another musician friend. I'll say his name because he said it on the air on my show, but his name is Matt Anderson, and he's a blues musician, and an amazing, like when you go watch him, like it's one of those people that there's probably 3 standing ovations during the show, and you go and you're just feel the vibrations of his music. And so Matt, brilliant musician, and I asked him, what was it like when YouTube first came along, and he wasn't getting paid for these performances that people were filming on their phone and airing. And he said, to be honest, the harder part for him, the struggle for him, was the quality of their phone. To him was like, this doesn't represent who I am. I'm better than this. Like, this doesn't look good. And somebody seeing this is going to say, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't look that good. Because this is especially early on with YouTube. I mean, a lot of the videos weren't high quality. So that's what we're used to. But he said even the sound it's from their phone. But what he said was, what changed his mind is a couple of those videos went viral. And when I say viral, I mean a little over 1 million. But for a blues artist, to have 2 videos on YouTube go over 1 million views was a big deal. And he said all of a sudden, I would see in a year, I would get 100 paid gigs from that video in a year. Wow. And all of a sudden he was going to fight. Like, he was trying to get the videos taken down and all this. And then he goes, wait a minute, this is introducing me to people I would never reach otherwise. I'm getting shows booked because the booker is seeing me going, we need this guy at our show. And I said, that's a compliment to you, to the extent that it's a phone video and they still say, this guy's so amazing that we need to book him. And so he said, basically it increased his bookings. And then at the time, CDs and he was actually putting records out too, we're still selling better than they are now. So he was even getting to the shows and selling his records and CDs on the show he wouldn't have had without YouTube. Mm-hmm. So to your point, Greg, I mean, there's always, I think it's like everything. There's always a way to evolve with it, and there's always a different perspective on it. I think it is a challenge right now for musicians, especially musicians that didn't want to handle the business side of it, being a musician anyway. But there will always be, that's the world. We'll always have to find a way to evolve, right? I mean, I guess we can look at the Industrial Revolution. And if we were having a conversation with somebody on here right now about it, they would say, this is horrible. And then, all these years later, somebody might say, well, that was such a great turning point in our history.
Yeah. Right.
So I think it's all probably perspective. But yeah, it's a challenge, and it's one we all have to face. And I'm glad to hear that you guys are rising to the challenge, and you're finding a way to still reach clients and make that difference, and probably impacting even more people, because you can reach more people the way you're doing it now, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's been a good transformation for us. It also really gave us a lot of energy to really define ourselves, because in this time there are so many people who have come forward wanting to help others and heal others, because there's so much pain and stagnation and congestion as people are trying to figure out, how do I go forward in the world right now? So the healing area is pretty full right now. So you have to be able to differentiate yourself in a way where people are attracted to you. And it's been a beautiful thing. Everything about what we've done has distilled even more. And we actually created a new program this year that we started in COVID. Right when it started, we were getting ready to finish all the video and do the stuff. And then COVID hit, and it was like, okay, this is the perfect, most difficult time.
I can relate to that, because I was in the same situation, in the sense that we had our live events planned that we were running, and everything was booked, planned, all that kind of stuff. And same idea. We had to say, how are we going to adjust accordingly? And for us, I mean, on one hand, I was talking about this with the previous guest, we moved some of our live events to a later date. But on the other end, we decided to add this format, which now, since we launched this format, we're over 100,000 viewers. So that's people we never would have reached. And even you could make the argument, well, if we had the live talks, they could reach, like, it's not like you're only going to reach the in-person audience either way. So if we had the live talks, they could reach people on YouTube, but it's a separate audience. We can still reach them. So it's two separate audiences. And to that point, we had to evolve because all of a sudden these live events aren't going to happen no matter what we want to do. We don't get the choice. We're not going to be able to force the events to happen, and you wouldn't want to anyway from a safety perspective. So same deal, like COVID happened and immediately it's like, how do we pivot? And for us, same thing, like the Blue Talks brand, we added the book series during that timeline. We added the podcast. I mean, so it actually evolved into something much bigger because of it. But to your point as well, it's not fun when it happens that minute. Like you said, you had all these plans and now you got to adjust your sales. I would say what probably helped you guys a lot is the fact that you probably go with the flow in the universe anyway. So you're like, there's a message here. There's a reason why this happened.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably what, you're probably used to that the universe dictates and you don't get to choose. And I'm just going to flow with what the universe says.
Well, and we've had our own struggles with that. We're in Northern California and we have also had the fires even before COVID. We actually had to learn that lesson because we had fires that were 5 miles from our house, that raged on for months, and our air quality, and we were having live events at that time. And so that the air quality and the nearness of the fires, even though we weren't in danger, power going out for days at a time. And we had to, decide with our live events, okay, what are we going to do? And, at one point we had no power. The air quality was bad. It was in the middle of winter. And we're like, okay, are we doing this live event? No heat. And we're in, okay, we're just going to, like you said, we're going to go with the flow. We're going to see what happens. We're going to act like we are going to do this. And sure enough, the 24 hours before it started, the power came back on. We got to have our air cleaners and everything happened. And we had a great event. We had new clients coming from that. We had a lot of transformation. So that was a huge lesson of going with the flow. And it really brought that top of mind to us about how important that was. And if you don't go with the flow, you can miss some really cool opportunities.
Absolutely. And it's hard. I mean, I would say it's not easy for everybody to make that transition or go with the flow. Like it's not like there's any kind of manual that says, how do I deal with a pandemic that I've never been in one before? Exactly.
I'm a big complainer about, dragging me kicking and screaming into having to say, okay, I'll go with the flow. So it definitely wasn't easy, but there is a technique to it. And if you just follow that, it does make life a lot easier.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that just as we start to bring things to a close, but how, when you mentioned, it's not always easy, that's one of, I think, the misnomers is that people think that somebody that's teaching this stuff has it all figured out. So based on what you just said, it's safe to say then, is it, Antonia, and both of you guys actually, is it safe to say that you don't always get it perfect?
Yeah, it's, in fact, the good enough is better than perfect is more like a way of life for me now. And I actually, when one of the things that we really deeply understand now is that imperfection is the signal to pay attention. And it's really what allows you to align with the core of how you're going to see what's going on and move on from there. When you get stuck in the weeds and you're looking for perfection, then you're just looking for all this detail, and your head gets so involved that you can't really see how to get through and just allow things to be okay as they are now. And allowing things to be okay is another part, because nothing is ever perfect. It is what it is. So we can look at that thing, in this global way and say that is the perfection. But our brains don't see things as being perfect because they're so just programmed to be looking for what's wrong and what's not safe.
Well, and really that's one of the things that we help people see is that when they're looking for perfection, that's your red flag, right? That's like, oh, okay, I'm going down the rabbit hole that is not helpful for me. So there's certain signs that, like, another one for me is I was kind of raised where everybody had like the worst case scenario was going to happen every single time. So I've had to really work to change that thought process on my own. No, my children are not going to be eaten by wolves every time they go out on a date or something, you know. And so it's that when you can be aware of where your brain is going, then that better prepares you to say, oh, look, that's what my brain is doing. That's an old habit. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. Mm-hmm. And so it's that be aware so you can be prepared of what your brain is going to send to you, you know, in terms of your old mental habits. So you can say, oh yeah, that's the one. That's what I'm used to doing. But that's not where I want to go. I want to go over here instead.
Amazing. So let me ask you then, as we bring things to a close, most important question for both of you is, if people want to work with you, they want to learn more about how they can take their self-care into their own hands and get somebody to help them, guide them through the process, or if they want to learn more about the work that you're doing in the future, where would you normally send them? Is there a hub or a main place?
You know, the best thing to do is to engage directly with us. We have a free gift that we offer to people, and it's 3 common blind spots that sabotage your success. So it's a way that you can kind of get to know us a little bit. You read this thing, but what we have, it's a really cool offer for right now is we love working and talking with people directly. So we have a free, what we call a total success session. When you go to this, when you go to www.selfhealthinstitute.com/blindspots, and maybe you could put that in, Corey.
Because we're on our phone.
We're on our phone here.
Yeah, so I'm going to put it in.
Thank you.
Self-health, HEALTH, institute.com/blindspots with an S at the end. So that when you download, it's a free PDF. When you download that, you can actually schedule a session with us and get into our schedule.
And we look at your vision and look at your goals and see, you know, what's holding you back from getting to where you want to go, and what in your body is holding you back, or what in your brain is stopping you, the self-doubt or the outdated limiting beliefs, you know, all of the whatever happened in your past, how that may be influencing you now.
Amazing. Well, we put that link in the comments, and of course people can connect with you. I'm sure they can connect with you on Facebook if they want as well. You're both, I believe, on Facebook actively. So this has been an absolute pleasure, as I mentioned. I knew it would be. With your permission, I'll call it a to be continued, because these conversations, I love to keep them rolling down the road as well. And, you know, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and say I so salute you and all the great work you're doing. So thank you for the work you're doing. And again, with your permission, I'll call it a to be continued.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Corey. So great to be with you.
Take care.
Thank you so much. We'll let you run and keep on doing the great work that you're doing.
Right.
Thanks.
You too.
Have a great day. Awesome. Amazing stuff. So hopefully you guys took some great insight from the message that Greg and Antonia were sharing. I know I sure did, about self-care and the importance of it and taking care of ourselves. And I thought it's a good breakup between talking about podcasting and writing. We have 2 or 3 more guests. I'm waiting to see if the guest we have on right now is maybe having trouble logging onto the StreamYard link. So what I'm going to do, and then right after that, we have Rosalyn Fung and we have Andrew coming up as well. So we have more great guests coming up. What I'm going to do is I want to go see if, just double check if I can help the other guests in any way. So what I'm going to do, I think Kelly's coming back soon too, but what I'm going to do, I told you guys yesterday about the new Blue Talks flyer, or sorry, trailer, I should say rather. And I said I was going to show you guys the new one. So I'm actually going to open it here in a second. I'm just grabbing the link right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it to get your thoughts on it. It's about 3 minutes, so that should give me enough time to just go and check on the other person. And of course, if something happens that it's taken me an extra second to find them, I just got to pause this and start it. So we start it right off the top for you. If it takes me a second more than that, it'll just play the next YouTube video, I imagine. So I'm going to share my screen. And like I said, I'm just going to let you guys see this. Let's see if I can get this happening. And we'll let you guys take a peek at the Blue Talks trailer that we just made that's going to be on the channels. So I'll let you take a peek at it, and feel free to put your thoughts in the comments, and then I'll be right back. So I am back, and that is the brand new trailer for Blue Talks. The only difference change that we've made since we put that together was before the podcast logo, we actually changed it to, we put just the word podcast. So everything else is identical. We just added the word podcast so that people would know what the point of the logo was. So yeah, that's the new trailer that we're going to be having on the different pages that are hosting Blue Talks. So we'll have it on the YouTube channel soon. So it's the first thing that you see when you go in. We'll also be having it on the C-Suite network. So as soon as you go into that page, you see it. I shouldn't assume. I'll conclude that maybe it'll be on the Apple version of the Blue Talks channel as well. And so that's the new trailer. I welcome any and all feedback, but I just wanted to share it with you guys so that you get that behind the scenes firsthand look. And so let's just see something here. I thought I saw another comment. I feel like it was from Marnie. I believe I saw a comment that she put. Let's see if I can find it right here. Thanks for sharing the Blue Talks author chapter segments. And she said, great to see us. So our pleasure, Marnie. Our pleasure, totally. And also, I wanted to tackle a couple of questions that I've had recently. I thought that would be a great way to basically address some of the things that you might be asking or wondering yourself. And we're having a challenge getting the other guest on, so we may have to reschedule her. So I'll be your visitor in between, and then we do have Rosalyn and Ed coming up as well. So when you're live, this is the stuff that can happen. So if you decide you want to put on a live event at any point, just know that hiccups can happen, and that's, you have to roll with the punches. So first of all, what a great day so far. I will come back to the couple of questions I wanted to take. And by the way, feel free to post questions as well in the comment section. If you have a unique question you'd like me to answer or tackle, I'm happy to do so. So feel free to put it in the comments, and I can certainly tackle your question around anything, but podcasting, speaking, influencing, writing, any of those things. I'm going to put a note here on Facebook as well. I'll put that on Facebook as well, so we can, in case anybody else wants to ask a question, this would be a unique opportunity. So as far as just a summary of this week so far, we've had an amazing week. If you've been here for some of it, I think you would agree. If you've been here for all of it, which I hope you have been, then I think you would even more so agree. We've covered a lot of grounds, and I say this too because you may want to check out the replays. But since we started, kicked off things with Mark Sanborn, the author of the 2 million plus selling Fred Factor. I say those numbers not to impress you, but more so to explain and impress upon you how much Mark knows about the writing business, and why, if you're wanting to write a book and get it out there to the world, you definitely should check out that interview. Right after that, we had Harry Paul, who's with the Fish book, 6 million sold, and likewise knows the book business, it seems like, inside and out, front to back. So if you want to learn more about the book business, check out his talk as well. Then we had Jer Carrier, who is inspiring us with her work, the great work she does as a multi-passionista. She does a lot of different things, and shared how you can manage a lot of different things and still make an impact. And then we had Susan with Avita Publishing, Susan Friedman, and she talked to us about the publishing business and how you can have a success with your book, whether you're self-published or with a publisher. And then we had our co-host, my co-host Kelly. She kicked things off with a presentation about bringing your book to bestseller. We had John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire, one of the most successful podcasts started by a non-celebrity. I don't know what the numbers are now, but at one point I know it was over 1 million unique listeners a month tuning into a show. Following John, we had Woody Woodrow, who's with the third largest independent band in the world, Our Last Night. And with COVID, of course, they've taken a shift in their business and a pivot. And so Woody's been able to release 2 really cool books in a series during that time. And he talked to us about that. I should mention John Lee Dumas shared some insight from the podcasting world that you won't find maybe many other places. Charmaine Hammond was on as well, talking with Kelly about how you can sell books more than one at a time in bulk. We had the Monk Dude talking about his unique writing style and approach to writing. Then Wednesday, we had Robert Garcia, who talked about how to get media for your brand. And we had Darlene Butts talking about how to get clarity around your brand. And then we had Tasia Valenza, the Emmy-winning voiceover actor, talking about how to communicate your brand and give great voice. That's her brand. Then yesterday, we had Jonathan Green, who talked about the importance of building your email list and how he's built a business around his email list, and why it's important as an author you find a way to actually get paid so that you can sustain it and help other people as well and get your book into more people. Then we had Brad Richard talking about him rebranding himself and what he's done with his podcast to create a new brand. Yesterday, we had Rebecca Whitman talking about her work and her podcast and how she works with people around her 7 principles. And then that brings us to today. This is like how you see those summaries of a show in 30 seconds. This is like a 1.5 minute summary of what we've done this week in case you want to go back and check out the replays. So we had Tricia Brouk on this, just 2 guests ago. And Tricia had a great message about how to be an effective communicator, how to share your message on big stages and small stages, how you can leverage what she's learned in the world of the arts and drama world to get on those stages and own your stage, and the big talk work that she's doing, and how you can possibly be on that stage whenever we have live stages again, or her virtual stage. And she obviously gave us a lot of insight around crushing it as a speaker at a world-class level. And then you just saw Antonia and Greg Van Becker, and they shared, of course, some great self-care insights so that you can take care of yourself while you're trying to juggle and manage all this stuff. So that's your 1.5 to 2 minute summary of what we've covered in the last couple of days. If you wanted to go back and check out some of the replays. So I mentioned as well, I wanted to tackle some of the questions that I get around podcasting, speaking, writing, what have you. And so first and foremost, I thought I would tackle the question I get around speaking and how to get more speaking engagements. Now, obviously, there's 2 different questions in that area. How to get more speaking engagements, and some of those engagements might be virtual and some might be live. And so what I'm going to tell you first and foremost about getting more speaking engagements is one of the big mistakes that people make is they don't know who the people are that would hire them to speak. So, there's so many directions I can go with this, like how to get paid to speak in terms of what you should be charging, and how to identify what your message is that people will pay for, and all that kind of good stuff. But again, one of the big things that people struggle with is finding quote unquote prospects that would actually hire them to speak. And so the big struggle there is, how do I find those people that are looking to pay somebody like me to speak? And so the answer to that question on how do you find those people is you need to go where those people are. And so I'm going to give you guys a little hack or shortcut as a speaker that'll help you dramatically to find people that will pay you to speak. And so the hack is, think about where those meeting planners or people hiring speakers are. And so if you think about it, there's a specific person that's hiring speakers, and there's a specific way to find them. The specific way to find them is to look at the speakers that are already speaking on the subject you are, and then find out who's hiring them. And there's even a way to do that. And so if you can find out who's hiring the speakers to speak on the same topic as you, and then you can find out that person's contact info and name, of course, you can then approach them. And you don't want to say where you got their info or anything, but you can approach them and say, hey, I'm just wondering if you ever bring in speakers for any events you run. Now, chances are they do, because you found it that they hired somebody else that speaks on the same thing as you at some point. If you find their name over and over again, there's even more of a chance they do it regularly. If you only find it once, it might be the case that they did it because it's somebody they know or a friend, or they did it once in the history of their company and don't do it often. So, it's always better if you can find the same name or company coming up more than once. But where you find it is the question you're probably driving at. We'll get over, Corey, get to the point. Where do you find these people? Where you find it is if I'm a speaker who's spoken for certain companies, and I have on my website or somewhere, I have a rave reviews thing, so that I say, here's what so-and-so is saying about my talks. And it could be like, let's just say John Smith at AT&T, regional director, and there's a testimonial that he's given me, whether it's on my speaker kit, my one sheet, my website, wherever you find it. And again, there's lots of ways to research this. I don't have time to go into all these, but what I will say is, if you use an example of rave reviews or testimonials, and you know how to find the testimonial that John Smith of AT&T gave to Diane Johnson from her talk, then what you can do is you can do some Googling to find John Smith's contact info at AT&T. And basically, that here's somebody that's hired a speaker, likely paid a speaker, and there's ways to find out even how much that person got paid to speak at the event. These are a lot of little hacks that I share with people when they work with me and I help them get speaking engagements. But what I'm getting at is that if you take away just this, if you can find the testimonials that they're providing to Diane, I forget what name I used, Diane Foster, let's say, and you can go and find out who's giving her testimonials. The names there, so John Smith at AT&T, are the people that you can reach out to because you know they hired a speaker, and if you know you've researched her and she speaks on the same thing as you, so they're willing to hire a speaker what you speak on. You know that if you can track them down, there's a good chance that they probably are going to hire a speaker again in the future. If you find out that they have an annual event or their name is in association with an annual event, even better, because you know they hire speakers every year. So this is a way that you can find the speakers that hire other speakers. And if you know that those speakers are getting paid, you can know that they actually pay speakers to bring them in to speak. So the research that you have to do is you have to find the speaker, and then you have to find their testimonials. And there's, again, lots of ways to do this. Find their testimonials, and the people that gave them those testimonials, if you can find their contact info, which usually is just as quick as a Google search, and if you're creative, you can figure out their email address and a Google search. You can find their contact info, reach out to them and say, hey, do you ever bring in speakers to speak on this subject? I would love to tell you more about the work I do, et cetera, et cetera. This is a way for you to not have to go Google online conferences and then go sift through conferences that don't pay speakers, or sift through conferences that don't bring in speakers, or sift through conferences that in some cases want you to pay to go to the event and pay for registration and everything else. This way you're going to targeted clients that are hiring speakers. And the reason you know that is because they're saying, this is an amazing speaker. We hired them and had a great experience. So again, that's a 5 minutes probably window into how you can find people that pay speakers. They track them down, and even on the subject that you speak on. And the way you're doing that is by seeing what subject the other speaker that you researched speaks on. Of course, there's so much more to this, and it's so much deeper in terms of the nuances and how you can set this on fire and even on autopilot. But because I get the question all the time, how do you find paid speaking engagements? This, what I'm telling you here, was a game changer for me. Figuring out what speakers speak on what I speak about. That was a tongue twister. And then figuring out where their rave reviews are about them so that you can find out the name of the person who provided the rave review, and then finding the contact info of that person. This is going to be so much shorter than you trying randomly to Google and find companies that might hire a speaker. So that's my answer for a shortcut or a hack for getting paid speaking engagements. Obviously, and I don't have time to go into the difference between the virtual side and the in-person side of that, but I will say what I just shared with you will work for either virtual or in-person. The one difference I'll say is that when you're doing the virtual, you're probably going to have to lower your fee. Whatever your fee is, it's probably going to be lower when you're doing the virtual event. So I just wanted to put that out there. So that was one of the questions I get frequently. Another question I get often, and I haven't really tackled it during this go-round, I've tackled it at our previous ones, but not this go-round, is around the question of, should I go with a publisher or should I self-publish? That's a question I get over and over on the author side. And we've tackled it a bit this week. I haven't tackled it personally. And I gave a teaser as to what I usually tell people, but it really comes back and down to this, is it comes down to what is the goal with your book? So what I would encourage and love for people to do, if you're watching this right now and you're working on a book, or you want to put a book out, or you're writing a book, or whatever that looks like, is I'd love you to sit down and say, what are your goals for the book? For instance, do you just simply want to make money from selling the book? That's going to be the hardest goal to reach, but let's say that's your goal. Do you want the book to generate leads for you on a regular basis? Do you want the book to reach a mass audience? Do you want the book to be in specific bookstores? Do you want the book to reach a niche audience or a much bigger audience? What I'd love you to do is ask those questions, answer those questions, and that answer is going to tell you, well, tell me, if you ask me, if you send me those answers, I can help you figure that out. But it's going to tell me, and it should likely tell you as well, whether you should self-publish or go with a publisher. The real difference comes down to one word, and you've heard me say this before, probably, if you've watched these events before. It comes down to distribution. So why you would go self-publish, let's go to that one first, is I mentioned one of the goals could be to make money from your book on the front end, meaning like the sales of the book. If you want to do that, unless you have a book that sells amazingly well, sells bucket or truckloads of copies, unless that happens with a traditional publisher, you're going to get a small amount per book. So if you only sell a small amount of copies with a traditional publisher, you're not going to get a whole lot of royalties. If, on the contrary, if you self-publish, you can probably buy your book And again, it's going to vary, but you can probably buy your book for as little as $5 or $4 a copy and sell it for 20. So, and if you ship in volume, meaning if you buy the book and self-publish and ship yourself 100 copies, the shipping per book will probably only work out to $1 or less per book as well. So you can be, say, $6 a book and sell them for $20. And if you're shipping them, you can charge for the shipping to send them to them. So the point is you can probably make $12 to $14 a book. So if your goal is to make money directly off the front end of the book, self-publishing is going to make you more unless you are that one fortunate, lucky person who sells a truckload of books. So that's the first side. So if you know that you want to make more money on the front end of the book, that might be a reason to self-publish. Another thing I didn't mention is control. So when you're self-publishing, you can decide when the book's released, you can decide how much it's edited, who edits it, what words you take out, what words you leave in, etc. Own the copyright, all that kind of stuff. So you own you have full control over everything when you self-publish. The other side is, so that'd be a question to ask yourself as well. How much control do I want? How quick do I want the book out? And that might, lean towards self-publish. Another thing is the style of book. Is it a niche book? Well, if it's a very niche market book, you might want to self-publish because you're probably not going to get those massive sales that is going to introduce you to a massive audience, and again, you're going to lose flexibility. And then also, because you're not getting to that massive audience, you're probably not going to make a whole lot of money off the front of the book. So that's another thing. Another thing I didn't mention is, are you building a back-end business from the book? Are you driving people somewhere? If so, you could go either way. But again, self-publishing might be the answer because you have more control of what you put in the book, whether you put how to reach you, how to connect with you, how to work with you, all that kind of stuff. So that might be another reason to self-publish. So you can see, as I'm lining up the common questions that the common questions you should ask yourself, a lot of them lean towards self-publish now. And that might be more so now because it's easier to self-publish. You're still going to have to do all the marketing on, not all of it, but a lot of the marketing on your own, whether you're with a traditional publisher or on your own. So for a lot of those reasons, I would lean towards self-publish in some of those areas. The other side, though, of that coin is, when I mentioned, is it a niche book or is it for everybody? If it's a book for everybody, if you feel this book has the potential to reach audiences everywhere, if your goal is to get the book into millions of hands, that's going to be much harder to do with a self-published book. And that comes back to my one word I said that dictates it all, which is distribution. A publisher is going to be able to get you the distribution that's going to be really, really, really hard for you to get on your own. So even though the publisher may take a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years to bring your book to market, even though they may make you make changes you don't want to, like even the title or the cover, even though the publisher, you won't make as much money on the front end likely, even though they might not let you put certain things in the book to help you generate back-end traffic, even though all those things are the case often, the key thing is they can give you distribution into places you can't get otherwise. So if you have a book that you feel is the next 4 Agreements or Celestine Prophecy or whatever, insert name here, that, book that sort of sold millions of copies and changed lives, a traditional publisher is going to be your best option. So at the end of the day, when you ask those questions, figure out how many of those answers lean towards self-publish versus publish. And I believe that's going to give you your answer, in my opinion. Your interpretation of that is going to give you your answer, in my opinion, as to whether you should self-publish or publish. You go with a publisher or traditionally or self-publish. And so, that's, I feel like it all comes back to setting your goals. I mean, if you started writing the book, don't change that. But if you haven't even started writing the book yet and you're starting to see, should I go with a publisher or self-publish, set those goals, ask those questions, and that'll help you answer that. The other thing is, you may not have the chance, because the truth is that, some people think that you can walk into a publisher and just say, hey, here's my book, I made this, publish it. And it's not always that easy. So you may not even have the choice, when you say, should I go with a traditional publisher or self-publish? You have the choice, definitely, if you want to go with a hybrid publisher. That's a publisher where in some cases you might pay for them to help you put the book out. In some cases, a hybrid publisher does more than that, meaning more than just helping you put the book together and stuff like that. And they might help you with the marketing. I mean, you may have that choice, but you're probably not going to have a choice. Or sorry, I shouldn't say you're probably not. You may not have a choice of going with like a big 5 publisher or self-publishing. The big 5 may turn down your book. You may not even get in the door. You may not be able to get an agent to get you in the door. So you may not have those choices. But at the same time, it may not matter if you ask those questions and realize you want to self-publish anyway. But if you want to go with a publisher, there are options for doing that. We mentioned John Lee Dumas on the show. John does have a big platform, and he does have a big following. But John has a big platform, a big following, and he was able to get a really good size book deal. He shared the numbers publicly, so he got a $325,000 advance from HarperCollins. So those things are still happening. They do happen. But again, bear in mind, he has a massive following. He has a very niche audience. That's a really big niche audience. And so you have to have some of those things in place. So I just wanted to share that on the publishing side. And so, so from that end, it really is going to come down to how you answer those questions. And that will give you the answer rather than, spending an hour with me explaining about your book. I think just some of those details will truly help you determine whether you should be with a publisher or self-published. So that was the second question that I got this week that I thought I would tackle here. And our next guest is going to be coming on momentarily. But the last question I get is, should I start a podcast or not? And why would you or why wouldn't you? And our next guest, we're going to be talking about her podcast. So I'll just say that, because we'll talk about this with her as well. But I'll just say that with podcasting, again, I think it all comes down to what are your goals, and I'll add in how much time you have to commit to it, because a podcast is a commitment. And a lot of people go into podcasting thinking it's going to be, you build it and the traffic comes and then I'll have unlimited traffic forever. And when that doesn't happen, they basically drop the podcast after 9 episodes or 5 episodes when they don't have those numbers. And so what I'll say is that don't even go there if it's not the right fit for you. So ask the right questions before you start it, and don't start it unless it's a good fit for you. So if you don't have the time commitment, if you don't have the time to commit to it, if you are only doing it because you feel it'll bring in traffic, I'll tell you that more often than not, it starts off slower than that. And so you have to ask yourself, what are your reasons you want to start a podcast? If you want to impact lives, whether it's one life or 1,000 lives, then a podcast will help you do that. If you want it to be a long-term funnel, a podcast will help you do that. If you want to create a niche podcast and serve a small audience, but a very powerful audience, then a podcast can help you do that. Another big thing is it'll give you credibility, and it'll allow you to get an audience with people you otherwise might not be able to reach. So you'll be able to interview influencers and leaders that otherwise might not be reachable for you. So from that end, you got to ask those questions. What are your goals? And you'll see a common theme here, right? It all comes back to what are your goals? Even when I was talking about speaking earlier and getting paid speaking engagements, that's another thing. You got to ask what your goals are, because the answer I gave you for how to get some paid speaking engagements was really dictated by you wanting to get paid speaking engagements. If that's not your goal, then the approach I told you won't be the best approach. There's a lot of other easier approaches, in fact. If your goal is, let's say, to get on stages where you can share your message, but you don't care if you get paid, or if your goal is to get on a stage where you can sell to an audience, you might not have to get paid to do that. In fact, sometimes you might even pay for those stages, and it still might be worth it if it's the right audience and you have a product to sell to them. So again, everything today, hopefully you're seeing, I think you should sit down and say, what are my goals? And if you know what your goals are, it's a lot easier to know the path to take. So if you know your goals are paid speaking, that's going to be a different path than non-paid speaking. If you know your goal is that you want to have distribution for your book, then that's going to lead towards maybe a publisher. Those other areas I mentioned might lead towards self-publishing. So podcasting, what are your goals? If you do want to reach people that are otherwise very tough to reach, podcasting gives you an excuse to reach out. So podcasting gives you that reason to reach out and say, hey, I'd love to have you on my show, or I'd love to share your message or story. And so when people say to me, how have you been able to get an audience with so many high-level influencers? I mean, at the end of the day, I'd be remiss not to say that it all really started with the podcast. I mean, that's where it all started for me. The podcast started it all because it was the reason I had to reach out to people. And it was also, it gave me an excuse to reach out, and it gave me leverage so that I could offer something in return for their time. And so that's what podcasting has allowed me to do. So if your goal is to interview people, or maybe even to build those relationships so that down the road you can collaborate with them, podcasting is one of the best ways I've seen to do it. But if your goal, again, is to get a whole bunch of listeners to tune into you and then buy your product, you're going to probably 90% of the people, or 90, maybe even 99, are going to experience challenges in getting those people to tune into their podcast on the big numbers they're thinking. So, we talked the other day about what those numbers can really look like. And, you got kind of probably an eye opening on that. So, it's going to really come back to what your goals are and, what do you want to do with your podcast? What is the reason you're doing a podcast? And this was intentional, by the way, that I tackled the podcasting question third, because it's a good segue for our next guest, who I'm going to bring right on, who we're going to talk about podcasting and more, but we're going to talk about podcasting. But that was why I segued there, because I want her to also maybe tackle this question of why she started a podcast. So having said that, without further ado, let me bring on Rosalyn Fung.
Hello.
Hello. My good friend, Rosalyn Fung. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. So good. Thank you so much for having me here, Corey. I'm very excited to share. And this will be my first podcast related interview. So cool.
I'm super stoked about that. And we had the guest that was before you. I'm not sure what happened. We're going to probably have to reschedule them. So I've been tackling questions that I get commonly. But I thought that's why you minutes early. We might as well jump right in, because there's been a bit of time where people have been just having me on the screen. And Kelly was with me earlier, but she had to dive off for something too. So it's been one of those days.
I love how we just roll with it. That's what it's about, right? Just being creative and flexible and just, all right, here we go.
100%. You have to do that, I think. And it gave me a chance to show the new Blue Talks trailer, which I said I want to show today and wouldn't have been able to otherwise, because I wouldn't have had that gap in between anybody. So everything happens for a reason. So Rosalyn Fung, where we start, usually Rosalyn, and by the way, just so you don't get surprised, Kelly may or may not jump in halfway through. I'm not sure.
She can run the party.
And if she doesn't, that's okay too. So my question where we started off with everybody, Rosalyn, is getting the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves before we dive in deeper. So can you tell us a little bit about Rosalyn Fung?
Yeah. So hi, everyone on the live and on the replay. I like to start with who I am first. So I am love, I am light, I am, you can probably tell, goddess warrior energy. And professionally, I am an intuitive mindsets and visionary business coach, and I specialize in client attraction and soulful selling. My soulmate clients are other heart-driven coaches, healers, light workers, therapists. I used to be a former registered psychologist as well. And I also love to work with people who are transformational leaders. So yes. And my well, it's actually a live radio show turned into a podcast. So it's called Activate Your Soulgasmic Business. It's very much personal and spiritual foundation with the business focus. So I really love helping people magnetize their soul tribe and monetize on their calling.
Amazing. And I want to, obviously, we're going to dive into your show. Just before we do there, I know that behind the scenes, you just launched your program again.
Yes.
So I'm curious, just even from an energy perspective, how did that go? Because
it is, okay, I'm going to totally be transparent. It is so cool to see how this is unfolding. This is the fourth time I'm launching Client Attraction Academy, which is a 12-week mastermind. And it's been really cool to see how each launch there's similarities to it. And I teach people how to leverage social media and attract organic leads. So I've built my business to 30K months doing this. And this is what I show people in my 5-day challenge. And then this is where we dive deeper in Client Attraction Academy. And this time, today's day 5. So we're actually still in the launch phase. This time, it's been really interesting because for the first time, I've invested in Facebook ads, and the people that are coming in, it's just like, Corey, I work so much on my personal and spiritual health, we'll say, and being more luminous and expansive. There's always that next level version of ourselves. And this challenge has really brought in some beautiful new energy that I haven't played with before, we'll say, because it's more globally expansive. There's people from around the world. I had one lady, she's incredible. I'm going to give her a shout out, Lydia. She is from Germany. She stayed up 3:30 a.m. to be on the live group coaching calls of my 5-day challenge. I'm like, wow, okay, if that's not a testament to how powerful this activation container, my 5-day challenge is, I don't know what is. And it's just been beautiful to see the gorgeous souls rolling in and excited about being part of the Client Attraction Academy. I love it when people say yes to themselves, because that's what they're really saying yes to. And then I'm honored that they've chosen me as part of their journey, as their guide. And it's just been such a beautiful unfolding. And one of the things, Corey, I've been really learning about and embodying is the power of neutrality, which it's really about being able to stay in your center, being neutral. You know, as you see the money rolling in, as you see the enrollment, it's like, yes, we're going to get excited. And it's really about staying as neutral as possible, because if we get too excited and we become ungrounded, then the opposite is true, that if your expectations of how many people you want to register don't get met, there's that attachment there, right? Emotionally attached, and then you're going to be taken out energetically and emotionally. So no thanks. And I feel like a lot of people, and myself included previously, this is why I wanted to practice neutrality, because we don't have, like, to a certain extent, we don't really have control. And it really is about not being attached to who shows up and who signs up. And so it's been so beautiful to be able to practice this, particularly in this launch.
I love it. And one of the things you said, you and I are both fast talkers. And so one of the things you said there that I wanted to circle back to, because some people might not have caught that, especially when you're watching video and live on the screen. But you said 30K months, right?
Yes.
Okay.
$30,000 months. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that's an important note for people that are listening to this that may want to work with you in the future. You know, we do, and you're all about, you know, we got to embrace money and be okay with money. So I know you're willing to say those details. Some people aren't there yet, but it's important for them to know that, not because it's like, oh, well, you know, you need to learn from her how to make $30,000 a month, but just from the perspective of, there's a couple of things we can learn there, that you're so open to talk about it because you've made peace with money. And then at the same time, that you're playing at a high level so they can grow and up level with you. And I just want to add that, you know, so we don't leave that behind. That's an important note there. And one of the things that I find interesting, and where I was talking about this yesterday, is about how certain people, and it feels like, again, the people that have made peace with money and understand how it can help other people, are transparent. So I mentioned we had John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire 2 days ago, and he talked about the book deal he just signed with HarperCollins, and he said he got a $325,000 advance. He said that's as plain as day, whereas some people would never say what their number was. And he said, well, I can't hide it. It's at their website for 90 months now. They've had an income report. You can see every penny they made from everywhere. And so he said, well, why would I hide it whenever you go to my website and see it anyway? But it tells you something about a person when they can openly talk about it, and not in a braggadocious way, just to say, here's what's possible for you. I just want
Absolutely. And I feel like, you know, it's all about, because I love teaching about mindset around money and abundance consciousness, and abundance comes in many different forms, money being one of them. And it's really about money being a mirror for you, and like, what shit does it bring up, right? When we think about money, and most of us, I think it's safe to say most of us have shame around money, right? Because of the way we grew up, it wasn't safe to be in this relationship with money. And so I'm on a mission to help people really expand and open up to the possibilities that, you know what, money is neutral. Just like everything else, everything's neutral until we put meaning to it. And how we do that is based on our belief systems, right? And so money is just another way in how we can practice being neutral. And money is energy. And so when we move into this place that it's our birthright to be abundant, again, every single form that we deeply desire, it's our birthright to feel good. In health, I believe health is wealth, and live in our purpose and monetize in our calling. That's the energetic exchange. Money is just an energetic exchange for you sharing your gifts and transforming people's lives. That's priceless. How many of us are in pain? We're human. On some level, we all struggle. And it's like, what's that next level version of ourselves? that, and when we arrive there, like that feels so amazing. It feels so good. Like that's priceless. We would put that's worth any money, right? So it's just energetic exchange.
Well, and obviously I'm going to focus on your show right away, but there's something I want to get your take on that happened this week that I shared earlier in the week, but I'd love to get your perspective on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this person the short story is I had this person reach out to me wanting me to join, and I didn't know them, but on Facebook, they reached out to add, and we have mutual friends, and I accept the ad, and then they sent me a private message that, hey, I want to add you to my private group. Is it okay that I do that? And I'm pretty overwhelmed with groups right now, but I still said yes against my better judgment. I'm just saying, like, I don't want to be that person that's saying no. I just want it to be abundance, right? Welcoming abundance. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll check it out. And then I didn't have a chance. They sent it late after that, so I didn't have a chance to do it yet, and I would have. And then they sent me a message 2 days ago, I want to say, and the message basically said, "Tell me about you and what challenges you're having right now, and problems you're struggling with." And they say, because as you know, everybody has one struggle point or more. So I'm curious which one you're struggling with. And so I was very sincere in my answer. And my answer was basically, I can happily say, this is the one time I don't have that struggle point. And I added it. I didn't just act like, no, I don't have that like everybody else does. I said, right now I'm working with 2 coaches. I have my team. Yeah. And so I have the people help me with it, but also I feel like I'm on the right path with it. And so there's nothing really I'm looking for help with. But I posed the question back. I said, well, but since you said that everybody has one, I'm curious what yours is.
Beautiful.
Anyway, no reply. Well, I haven't heard from them since, but I could see immediately they saw my message. So my take on that is you were interested in a conversation with me if I was a prospect.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm not, or because I switched the question back on you, which is just an open question, now all of a sudden there's no value there. I mean, my question to you is, A, have you ever had that? And B, how do you deal with it if you do? Because I'm sure we all experience some degree of somebody coming to us to pitch us something. And then if we don't buy, all of a sudden we're not valuable anymore to them.
Yeah, I have had people cold message and right away, offer something, which I think is beautiful. I think nothing wrong with it. I think that's awesome. It's something that I would say for me, like, build those relationships authentically, but do not be attached. Like, I think relationships are currency. And again, currency could be abundance in different forms. Like, this person comes into your life or divinely guided for whatever reason. And so sometimes it's more about the lesson. So when somebody comes in and does that and offers that, I will check, I will feel into it. I don't say yes to everything because I would get way too overwhelmed. And it's like, okay, well, I have no problem saying my boundaries. So I'll say no. It doesn't feel aligned, I'll say no. If I'm open, I'll say yes. And I feel like sometimes you can tell if somebody is just checking you out if you're a prospect and not really caring about the relationship. We can tell. Energy doesn't lie. And so I think that's really cool, Corey. I don't know if I've ever turned it around and be like, what are your challenges right now? So I'm going to try that. That's really cool.
And it was a sincere question because my feeling is, and this is just me thinking it loud, but are you somebody who legit feels everybody has a challenge? Or do you feel, well, I've got it all together, but this is a way I can try to open up a conversation, eventually turn them into a prospect? That's what I want to know which of it is. If you come back and if the person came back and said, well, I'm running a thriving business, but I have 2 kids and I'm a single mother. So that's a challenge just to try to make that work. Yeah. I would applaud that. Because you're still coming back and saying, so what you're saying you feel to be true, everybody has a challenge.
Yes.
So if you believe that to be true, you should have a quick answer. You should know what yours is, especially if you're trying to help somebody else with theirs. You should have great clarity on what yours is.
Yes. And I think what we're really going into is the power of vulnerability, right? And it's in the power of us being open and vulnerable that connects us. I would say that that's one of my strengths is I have no problem. I'm a total open book. I'm very transparent with people. As you know, we know each other very personally, but publicly, if you guys follow me, you will see I do not hide anything. Like, this is me. And when people meet me, they're like, you're exactly like how you show up. I'm like, yeah, why would I be anything else? But that's also what I teach is Be, do, have. Be who you are, fully expressed in all your, we'll say, weirdness and quirks and all that. And then create and do life from this place of who, life and business from who you authentically are, so you can have all that you desire. It is, and this came from my pain. And I really believe our purpose comes from our pain. So my pain was I was unconsciously operating from this place, this belief that I'm valued in my doingness. So my performance, my achievements, my status, rather than my beingness, who I am. And my doingness never felt enough. So no wonder I was this perfectionist, this overachiever. I was super hardcore type A. And that was back in 2008 when I had a breakdown and the breakthrough and learning how to come home to myself. And it continues to be an ever evolving journey. I will not stop.
Well, just so people know too, because I know whenever somebody is looking off to the side, somebody's like, who's there or what have you, people know that I'm managing the whole fort today. And we had the guest that was on, that was supposed to be on before you, and she sent me a message and said, can I still join? And her internet went down where she's at and she couldn't get it back up. And so I had to reply because I don't want somebody joining in and I see them in the background and I can't communicate with them. So I just wanted to let people know that's the type of stuff I'm doing. But Rosalyn, what I also wanted to add on to what you just said, two things. One, did you hear what I had said? We were talking about it I was talking about it to Tricia, and I know you said you really liked her energy, so I know you watched some of it, about the ice cream. Did you hear what I said that Tasia shared with us yesterday?
No, I missed that one. Please let me know.
I just love it. We were talking about how you're not always right for everybody. And Tasia said her acting teacher or somebody she worked with told her this.
Yeah.
That she said, Tasia, what kind of ice cream do you like? And Tasia said, well, I like whatever it is, toffee fudge Ben and Jerry's. And she said, what Ben and Jerry's don't you like? She said, Cherry Garcia, I hate it. And she said, you know what though, Tasia? It's probably one of their most popular ice creams, and they sell millions of cups of it, and people love it. So even though it's not for you, it's for somebody else.
That's right.
And she said, so ask yourself, what ice cream are you? And own it. So I'm toffee fudge.
1,000%.
And so I feel like that's you. Like you're a specific, and I'll use the ice cream metaphor. You're a specific type of ice cream. Yeah. And maybe not everybody's going to get it, but there's enough people that do that are going to learn from you and impact. You're going to impact enough lives so that you are going to make a big dent in the universe because enough people get the type of ice cream you are. So I just want to add.
And not everyone, and this is why I like my whole brand is fun, bold, sexy, right? The bold piece is all about being authentically you and showing up, sharing your truth, sharing your message. And this really is you embodied in the essence of you, and it's got your soul frequency. So when I say soulmate clients, I'm like, that's on purpose, because from an abundance consciousness mindset, there is absolutely no competition. If somebody does something very similar to me as a business coach, gets similar results with their clients, but our vibe is going to be really different. Our message could be similar, but how each of us are going to deliver it. So there's going to be certain people that will be attracted to the way I deliver it. And then there's going to be certain people that are going to be maybe not so like, they might be repelled, and that's okay. They may be just like, meh, right, with my vibe, and that's totally okay. So I always like to say, in fact, I have a t-shirt, it's part of my website. It says, I'm not for everybody. And I think we really need to remember that it's okay that we're not for everybody. Our purpose is not to please others. It is not our purpose. We did not get put on this earth to please other people. We got put here on this earth to live in our soul mission, and whatever that is, whatever rules we have, right? And so it's like it's like really being connected to our why. And for me, our why is consistent across our personal and our professional life. So that we do have is very important. Community for me is really important, to have people feel like they belong, because at the very core of us, we just all want to belong. And so that's the other piece, is like, again, we're not for everybody. If you try to squish parts of yourself, or pretend you're somebody you're not, or you're trying to fake it till you make it, which I hate that concept, then it's only going to take you so far before you're going to crack, because your real self wants to come out. It's your soul. We're so want to play. And when we're putting on masks all the time, that's exhausting. And that was me back, my former version of myself, trying to be a perfectionist, trying to look perfect all the time. And just, no. I am super goofy and silly and playful, and I want to bring that into my business. I mean, fun is part of my last name. So it's just part of it, right? So yeah, it's deeply important.
And as a side note, when we showed the trailer, I mentioned the Blue Talks trailer. I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I have a tiny little Rosalyn clip in there from Harvard. And it's just the clip that basically says, I was confident I had this kind of life, but behind closed doors. And then I just leave it as a teaser. But that's that part of you that, on the outside, we see one thing, but it doesn't always mean it's the same on the inside. And I have to say, when we talk about this idea of finding the right people for you, we had Eleanor Beaton on, I'm going to say two events ago. And one of the things she said that stuck with me ever since, and I see it in her emails, is she says, what I try to do is work really hard to repel the wrong people.
Love it.
Let people know I'm not for you. But really, at the end of the day, that means she's working just as hard for people to identify who she is for. But I love that idea that it's okay. And in fact, it should be admirable. If somebody's not a fit for you, you should fire them. And if you're not fit for them, they should fire you. And
it's all about alignment. And, I would really tweak it. And maybe it's just because I was from that energy in my former version of myself of like, you have to work hard to like get these results. Not that I don't work hard. Okay. I'm very clear. I do work hard. However, when we feel so aligned and we're allowing ourselves to just have very spiritual, so divine move through us, it doesn't feel like work at all. It feels so freaking easy when we get to just be, we get to create. And I will always say this, because I teach about mindset, soul, and strategy, which mindset and soul is really about our vibration, our energy. And so if we're in a higher vibration, such as love, peace, joy, if you look at that from a neuroscience perspective, what's driving us to be in that vibration are our thoughts, right? So when we are in a higher vibration, I'm going to say this always trumps strategy. So mindset plus soul plus strategy. A lot of times, even when I'm working with clients and they're so focused on the doing, and the strategies, they're like, but Roz, this isn't working. And I'm like, how's your vibe been? I'm frustrated because I'm only going to be happy when I have the clients. Okay, that's your problem right there. That's your belief system. Let's shift that and rearrange it and realign and recalibrate. So as soon as, and it doesn't take long because I'm really good at doing that, shifting my clients' beliefs on an unconscious level. And literally within the next day, they start to show up differently. They start to be feeling more in a higher vibration. And they're like, holy, and this literally happened a couple days ago. I had a client and she's like, oh my gosh, I feel so amazing. I feel so inspired. She put in the strategies from this new vibrational place. And she's like, I just had a couple people reach out to me. I'm like, this is what it means to be magnetizing. Right? Now, when it comes to business, absolutely, strategy is important, but what's more important is the vibration and then having the strategy supporting it. Just having the vibration itself and you don't have any strategy, that's probably not going to work in the long run. Having the systems is important. And the most important is your vibration, is your trust in the universe, is you showing up as who you truly are. And that's how you magnetize your tribe.
It's interesting. I'm going to segue now to the podcast, but I'll add in a friend of ours that we both know. I think you can figure it really quickly.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I'm like, I know who you are. You're talking about.
You heard me say earlier about the Brendan Burchard thing?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to bring up, and that's a good example, right? Brendan he releases his inner dork, and he's okay with that. And hey, he's got at one point he probably still does the largest self-development YouTube channel in the world. He's got a following of, 10 million followers. I think he did out okay, just being his inner dork and being okay with that. So,
Right.
like I said, even if he's not for her, he's for somebody else. So I just want to add that in. But when you said I know who that is, I didn't realize you were meaning that point when I was saying about.
I'm like, I totally know who that is.
So now to move one step forward, and this is my segue, has to do with somebody that you connected me with, and I won't say any part of his conversation because it wasn't recorded for an interview, so I won't share a personal conversation. I'll just say my side of one thing that came up was we were talking about your energy. And so I'm talking about Randy Spelling, who you had on the show on your podcast recently. And so, what I said to him, again, I won't say any of our conversation because I'll tell you personally, but I'm not going to do it live. But I said, and I have to say about Rosalyn, the energy that you see with her, I've known her probably 4 or 5 years now. And I said, to be honest, and I'm telling you this in real time. At first I was like, I wonder if that's like her energy or if that's who she's becomes when she's out in front of people. Yeah. And I had this with another guy I knew for years. And I thought, okay, I'm waiting for the moment that drops and this is not really him. And after a year or two, you start saying, okay, what am I doing? This is who they are. And so I said to him, I said, I'm going on 5 years now and she's the same person she was on day one. So that energy that she brings that attracts the right people, that's who Rosalyn is. And that's important. Like, it's authentically you. So I just wanted to say that even this conversation yesterday, when we said about, like now saying about the ice cream, even the conversation I had with him yesterday, it's still the thing. The flavor of ice cream you are, we're okay with that flavor of ice cream.
That's right.
So that's what matters, right? There's a few people that's the flavor of ice cream they've been looking for and waiting for. So I just wanted to. But the reason I said that's a segue is because you had him on the podcast really recently. So I heard his name to make that a segue to your show. Your
Thank you.
On the network, right? The network?
That's right. Times network. Yes, that's right.
So let's start into the podcasting. Again, I say podcasting. I'm still used to saying that. I started out saying online radio. And I switched, and it's hard for me to get back. But let's just say interchangeably, I mean radio or podcasting when I'm saying
that's right. Yeah.
So my question is, the first, and this is the biggest one, because this is the question a lot of people ask, should I do it? My question is, what was the catalyst? Why did you decide you wanted to get into having an interview show, having a show to reach people, all that kind of stuff?
If you can't tell, I love talking. I love creating impact. And I love sharing. I am a student of life. And so I really feel it's deeply part of my purpose and deeply so important to help others and serve, and to do that in many different ways. And I think that us speaking our message and speaking our truth is such a powerful way, like the platform of having a live radio show, podcast, it's such an amazing way to reach people that you may not normally reach. And so for me, I felt really inspired to take that next level of visibility for myself to reach audiences globally. And it's been really interesting, Corey, because I know you've been really supporting me as a mentor in this too, and giving me some wisdom and insights of your years of being a podcaster. And then initially I thought I'm going to have this mostly as me speaking. And it's really turned out to be more of an interviewer podcast. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I just love the conversations. It's a very conversational podcast. And I love learning from my guests. Every single one of my guests, and I'm going to say this to you as you guys are watching, we all have gifts and we all have a message to share, and we all have our own truth. And again, when we're standing behind our mission and we're playing at that next level, we're wanting to play at that next level, we're not going to be stoppable. We're unstoppable. And so it's been really cool to have these guests, and I'm just learning. I'm soaking in myself. You can, if you guys are listening to my podcast, you can hear me just like I'm asking all these questions. I'm super curious. I'm relating back to it, from my own personal journeys and my lessons. I want to share what I want to share what happens when I'm working through my own shit and then what the lessons are so that other people don't have to make the same mistakes, or if they're in the same kind of shit, then they can be like, oh, yeah, okay, here's a different perspective to feel into that might resonate with you. And so that's been really powerful. And then the other thing is, I didn't mention it earlier, I also speak light language, which is language that our soul understands. Only our soul understands. It's light frequency. It's from cosmic, divine energy, higher power source. And so what light language does is it heals, it clears anything that doesn't serve or support you. It aligns you, realigns you, recalibrates you. Mine specifically, because I'm an abundance warrior, it actually can activate your intention of what kind of abundance you would like to receive. So on my podcast, and I know that sounds totally out there, and even as I'm saying, I'm like, I know you guys, it's totally out there. And when I deliver my light language, whether it's in a private session with my clients, I also read Akashic Records, which is accessing records of your soul. When I go back to your past lives and I can use my light language to clear any blocks that affects you in your current life, it is crazy, amazing what unfolds within hours, if not the next day. Things shift so powerfully. And I do that on myself too. I can read my own records and then clear stuff. And in the moment, right after, things shift. So light language is very powerful. If you haven't experienced it, listen to my podcast, feel into it. Usually people feel tingles. They feel, they may feel lightness. You may receive downloads and messages that are, and it's from divine, from pure love, unconditional love. So it is safe to receive. And then people message me like a day or two later saying, wow, like, I just want to tell you the impacts this meditation, this light language had. So yeah, it's something that so here's I felt really weird about speaking light language. And I didn't feel confident. So I'm like, oh, are people going to think I'm like extra weird? I'm like, okay, I need to practice what I preach. And so I need to understand light language more. So I hired Aurora Light. She was my soulmate client, and I'm like, I think I'm yours. So I hired her to help me understand my light language and understand how I can use it, because I knew it was such a powerful gift. I have friends that I've been people who I've been friends with for a couple of years, and they speak light language, and I'm always like, oh my gosh. And I just knew deep down one day I'm going to be able to do that. I'm going to be able to speak, and it got gifted to me. So from there, I'm like, now what, right? And so having a coach supporting me in expanding and understanding and having the confidence to deliver it has made a difference. And I can see myself being taken from like kindergarten to like preschool to like elementary, and the textures and the richness and the power and the potency of it has really evolved over the last, I'll say, year.
So I guess we can say it was a good decision to start a podcast. And,
yeah, that's a long-winded answer.
No, I mean, I'm just backing that up, that how passionate you got about it tells us it was a good decision to start a podcast. Yeah. And a couple of comments I saw that were coming in while you were talking is one's from Shelly saying, hello, beautiful Rosalyn Fung. And great info. Thank you for all you do, from Marnie Hill. And so Shelly is my girlfriend. If people didn't catch that, I didn't say who it was. But then my mother comments every now and then. She said she loves talking. She's related to your mother, Corey, that being me. Laughing out loud.
I love it.
So those are.
I know you tell lots of stories about your mom, and I know you love her. Your mom sounds like such an incredible human. I mean, she raised you. The stories you've shared about your mom have made me cry. So that's a really big compliment.
She'll hear that, and I'll also say, if people want to send. If people believe in the power of community and collaborative prayer, my mother's trying to find her 12-year-old cat that she doesn't know if got out of the house or is in the house hiding. And so people want to send prayers for her. She's, I mean, my mom's kind of distraught because she's never lost a pet ever, and she can't figure out where she's at. So I know it's possible the cat, she said the cat didn't eat treats earlier in the day. So we know it's possible when cats don't feel well, they go hide for a while. And that's what she's hoping happened. Or the other thing is cats do come back, and somebody said, well, it wouldn't make it out in the cold, but I mean, they're hunters, right? They can go hide under a place or whatever. So anyway, I'll just send the prayers out for that.
Sending it positive vibes.
Absolutely. And so Rosalyn, going back to the podcasting side of things for a minute, I'm curious because this is something I find a lot of people struggle with early on with podcasting or radio is the numbers. You know, how many people tuned in? How many people checked it out today? How many people checked it out last week? Did you have, so what's been your relationship with the numbers?
Nada. Like I honestly I don't look. What's more impactful is that for me, like because I'm so relationship based, what's more important to me is the messages that come in. Because if that episode could touch at least one life, awesome. And when the messages come in and people are like, oh my gosh, I listened to this episode and that was such a mind-blowing episode. Here's how I'm, and I'll ask because I'm sincerely interested. Beautiful. Like, because I always say knowledge is not power, but applying that knowledge is powerful. So how are you going to take that, if you don't mind me asking, into your life? Because I would love to hear how this episode is going to change your life, right? And so that is more important to me. If we look at numbers, it's also really hard, like on the radio show, so on Own Times Radio, I don't think they actually have a way to really track it. It's a really big network. Like they have 500,000 new visitors a month. And then on top of that, they like blast it out to all the podcast platforms. And I think the only podcast platform that I can sort of like measure is Spreaker. So when I went there to the States, I have had 37 episodes. So it's still a newer podcast. It has gotten over 6,000. I think we're at 6.2K downloads. And and those are just the downloads alone and not the plays. And that's just Spreaker alone, right? That's not including all the other platforms. And I'm blown away. Like, to be honest, I'm like, I know my podcast is awesome, but I'm like super blown away by that. But like I said, I don't pay attention. Like, it's just like, why? I don't know. It sort of would take people out. For me, I focus more on the impacts. I focus on the conversations, and I totally trust that whoever is meant to listen to this episode will be guided there. Everything is vibration, right? So that's what's more important to me.
So I love that. And I'll tell you why I asked that. I asked it to a lot of podcasters because I feel like now that podcasting has been around a minute, enough people have discovered it. And so what happened early on is everybody was focused on numbers. And I think, and in fairness, when I go back to when I started, 9 years ago, you're earlier on, so maybe you're trying to carve out your piece of the thing, because if you have these subscribers, they're theoretically, if you build it early on, they'll be with you and that gets you more listens and all that. So people are really focused on it. And I find now what's happening, which is great, is the people that are focused on it disappear after 9 or 10 weeks because they're too focused on it and they don't like what they see. Because if you're focused on the numbers and you went into it for the numbers, then you're expecting big numbers. So like when you go into it, you're thinking, well, I have 10 episodes out now, I should have 400,000 listeners. And that doesn't happen. And so those people just leave. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it weeds out the people that weren't there for the right reason, perhaps. So
can I say, Corey, that's also analogous to when we're chasing the money, right? When we do something because we think that's the thing that's going to make us money, what happens? It's not fun. Right? Because we're not connected with our deeper why, our deeper purpose. It always comes down to that. Let that be your fuel to your fire. And the money will show up. The numbers will show up when we're actually connected. It's our soul frequencies, the vibration that allows us to put ourselves out there so the people that are meant to listen, to come in, to work with us will. And that's what's really important. It's not like, I'm going to do this to get clients. I'm going to do this. So, I want to do this for impact. And yes, clients will show up. I trust that. And I want to do this for impact.
Yeah, I love that. And like yourself, early on, I was fairly focused on numbers, admittedly. Again, 9 years ago, that was the thing. It was almost like the in thing to do. And I'm talking now with like your listenership on a show. But it's funny because I basically got away from that completely. But I did look at numbers a couple of weeks ago for a specific reason. I took a 6-month break from my show after 9 years. And what I was curious about is, what's the listenership like when you haven't had a new show in so long that people clearly think your show's done forever? So it's like, who still listens to a show that thinks it's done forever? And the numbers aren't as high, obviously, as when we're going regularly. But on one platform, and I shared this yesterday, and I've never shared the numbers publicly because I'm not concerned about the numbers, but just to tell people the power of podcasting, after you build it, the numbers on one of our platforms was 3,200 listeners after 6 months with no show at all.
Wow.
I mean, that's the power of podcasting. And when I say that, that's one platform, and that's, again, without no new shows. So that's all listeners. And this is powerful. That's evergreen. They're listening to the past episodes that haven't, like, the work done for them was like a year ago.
Yes.
Where else could you have it?
Yes, I was just going to say that too. It's so powerful when, like, it is there. It's free content, and it's there for whenever people come in and they feel aligned. And it's just kind of like, right now I'm reading The Untethered Soul. It's a book about being able to sit in the seat of your soul and be a witness to your ego and your thoughts. And I've had this book for like 2 years. And let me tell you, every time I tried to pick it up and read it, I was like, it's not resonating. Now more than ever, because I've been coming home to myself on deeper levels, it's really like, I can't put it down. I'm like, I want to eat it all up. And so I feel the same about podcast episodes. It's like, when it's divinely guided and time, that like the right people will come in and soak in what you're sharing. And that's what we want. We want people who are engaged in our content and lean in closer and learn more about how they can, from a business perspective, also work with us, be part of our community, right? Because we're all, again, want to find a place where we can feel like we can belong. We do.
Yeah, and I'll tell people if they want to check out that book. I think the author is Michael Singer.
Yes.
And yeah, it's an amazing book. And the other thing with you just said there about getting those right people again. I said this the other day, but I believe this to be true. Somebody else said it one time and it stuck with me, and I don't remember who it was. But the idea that if you think about, okay, if I had 100 listeners on my podcast, like on an episode, and the reason I even have this conversation is new podcasters quit, even the good ones, because they're worried about these number things. So trying to get through people's heads that the numbers aren't as crucial as you think they are. And so I always make the analogy or metaphor or comparison. If you could have 100 of the right clients and it was just across town, would you drive across town to speak to that room of 100 people? Almost everybody would say.
Yeah.
So why then do you have a show with 100 listeners and you say only 100 people tuned in? What's the point?
That's a mic drop right there. Did you guys hear that? Because that is seriously, Corey, right there. That's like, yes, that's exactly what it is. It's not about anything with email lists, right? You can still create abundance and prosperity with a small email list if that email list, those subscribers are your soulmate clients, are your right audience. They are leaning in versus having a really big email list and like a big percentage aren't actually your right clients, right? So like yes, I love what you just shared.
Well, and even selecting guests, I know we're starting to wind down here, but even selecting guests, it's got to be a right fit. And so I said yesterday, I shared, this is 100% true. I've had maybe 2 guests out of thousands that I was willing to. Now I'm talking since after my first year, that when they asked me, can you put together questions that you're going to ask us? I've only said yes twice in that amount of time because that's not the right guest for me. I want a guest who can fluidly go with the answers. Now I openly say one of them was Jack Canfield, early guest and they want questions, I get it. He does how many interviews a week? They want to make sure it's the right fit for him as well. And if I want a guest of his size, somebody who has a following like he does, then I have to decide if I'm willing to do that. Well, I did it. Mm-hmm. And so I did it 2 times. But the other thing I ran into is I've had a couple of guests that wanted me to pay them to come on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And even though I've been a fan of their work forever, they're not my fit. That's not a good fit for me. Yeah. So meaning like I would have no issue if I was doing something different than the podcast. Then we made an agreement where I said I'll make a donation, and you can make the donation. I'll give you the money to do it. I have no problem with that at all. But on a podcast, when I haven't paid Jack Canfield, I can't pay this person. Mm-hmm. I'm not comparing the stature of the influencer. I'm just saying when I haven't paid all these people, I can't then pay you, even at a good conscience. But the fact that you want money for the podcast, one of them was $1,200. They want it.
You're doing them a favor.
But they have an audience.
I think what you're getting to though is, it's about alignment, right? I do have people messaging me, it's a PR person, and then they're messaging me on behalf of their clients to get their client on a podcast. So they've got some sample clips, and literally this week this happened. So I went to go look, and I'm like, they clearly have not listened to my podcast. They clearly do not know what my podcast is about. They're just like trying to, it feels like a numbers game, because clearly this person was not aligned in terms of their topic even. And so I'm like, no, like it definitely, everything comes back down to alignment. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, and I feel like you're right. It's a numbers thing, and sadly, the PR person, they're trying to show their worth. So if they can land your show, even if this is the bad part, even if it's a horrible fit for their client, they can still say, "I got you eight spots. I got you 8 interview spots."
Anything.
Not at all. But here's the good part: because podcasting has become a medium. Now, there's PR people that will say, we'll get you on 10 spots in the next 3 months for this amount of money. But the crappy part about that is they're not saying the right spots. They're not saying it's going to be targeted to you. So if they come to you and say, here's my guest, and if they get them on show, and you on the show and you're going, this isn't good at all, and the guests themselves isn't a good fit, so the energy didn't go well, the podcast didn't go well, but they paid for that spot. It's not, to me, it's a lose-lose. That person,
it actually hurts in the end, because it's not a win-win-win, right? It actually hurts. It could hurt the person's reputation. It could hurt, it just, no, right? So alignment is everything.
I think that's the theme for our interview today. Alignment is everything.
Yeah. Somebody write that in the comments. Really big cats.
Yeah, alignment is everything. I'll put it in the comments in a minute. So, Rosalyn, I want to respect your time. So, I could have an interview with you, I think, for 4 hours.
We can talk all day, Corey. Like, when we schedule our personal chats, we're like, half an hour is not going to do it. Like,
and that other person that you and I both know who it is, when I schedule chats with them, it's the same thing.
Yeah, her and I, us. Like, we've been on a double date. You're like, are your husbands even going to get any words in?
We've given her like 10 invisible shout outs today, but nobody knows who we're talking about. So, Rosalyn, I said I want to respect your time. So the question I have is, how do people hear the show that we've been talking about? How do they learn more? Thanks for being our first guest to talk. First time you talk about podcasting. Thanks for being. Doing that on our show. And so, how can people learn more about you? How can people reach out to you if they want to be the right alignment? And how can they listen to your show? All that kind of good stuff.
Okay, all the goods. Okay, so I'm very active on social media. I mean, it's part of what I help people do is leverage social media. So you can find me on Facebook. Clearly I'm tagged here. So Facebook friend me. My professional page is Rosalyn Fung Coaching, Bold Sexy Warrior. My Instagram handle is Bold Sexy Warrior. And on my Instagram link in bio, you'll see the live radio show link as well as my podcast link to Apple iTunes. But my podcast, again, is called Activate Your Soulgasmic Business. And you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker. Those are usually main platforms. I'm also on YouTube too. So you can find Activate Your Soulgasmic Business on YouTube under the Om Times channel.
Love it. Did you see what George wrote there as well?
I can't see the comments. What did George write?
George wrote, alignment is everything.
Thank you, George.
George Morris. He must have been typing as soon as you said the words.
Oh,
and,
so good.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to quickly mention, if you are like feeling called to come join my free community, I do have a free Facebook group, Magnetize and Monetize, for coaches, healers, and entrepreneurs. So you can find that on my personal page. You can just scroll down, click on that image. Yeah, there we go.
And so, Roz, the last question, I guess, I mean, after the last question I just asked, but the launch that you're doing right now,
yes,
this is something you're going to do again? Like, what I'm getting at is people, if they get onto the Facebook page you just mentioned, like, where's the best place for them to get into your loop and your network so that they know the next time you open the doors?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you guys can connect with me at, you can PM me, or just, you can still join the challenge. It's still up. Today is day 5, but you can just binge over the weekend. So you can go to www.7figureconfidence.com/challenge. Okay.
I'm typing this in right now. So
yes, thank you. And if you wanted to join my academy, my Client Attraction Academy, it's the same URL, except instead of challenge, it's academy. So I can drop those links in the chat later.
Yeah, please do. And the interesting part, which I'll go and check if there's anything I have to share with you, Rosalyn, but because we use StreamYard now, they changed it all around, Facebook's rules and that. We're on like 14 streaming right now, 14 different platforms, but I have to go to each one to see the comments separately because only certain ones show on StreamYard.
And you're doing this one-man show today, hey?
Yeah, you
I'll do the Facebook one.
Yeah, please do. It's funny, we were talking about the power of podcasting and the power of doing this type of thing as well. But one person from LinkedIn, who I don't know, like it's somebody that I'm probably connected with, but maybe I'm not, they were watching from Uganda today. So,
amazing. See, this
right?
is so amazing. It's so cool who we can reach. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And our next guest is from far away as well. So I'll, he's going to be able to tell us where he's from and people will probably pick it up from his accent. But Rosalyn, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. I always appreciate you, as you know. I'm going to call it a to be continued because we know it's not our last conversation. And thank you for all the great work you're doing for so many and helping them find their ideal clients, because we need more of that. So
Thank you, Corey. And I want to acknowledge you as well for who you are and what you are putting out in the world and continuing to make a huge impact in changing lives. So love you. Thank you so much.
Always my pleasure, my friend. I'm going to send you to the back and I'm going to bring our next guest right on. But thank you again for being here. And say hi to, you say it publicly, so I guess I can say hi to your silver fox.
I will. My sexy silver fox husband. Happy Valentine's Day.
See you later. Going to bring our next guest right on. Mr. Ed Andrew, how are you doing, my friend?
Corey, very good. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. So where are you coming at us live from today?
I'm from the Hunter Valley, Australia, which is about 2 hours north of Sydney, and it's 6 a.m., so I'm trying not to wake up the kids and my wife and everyone else.
Awesome. We'll understand that you're speaking
quietly.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about technology today is we can be anywhere in the world and make this stuff happen. So
absolutely.
Just when I think about in the last 2 hours, I didn't ask Greg where they're from. I can't remember. I know wherever they're from. One of our guests, Greg and Antonia, were on. They used to have to go to the top of a hill to use their cell phone. So they're from remote. And then our first guest, Tricia, today was in New York. And then Rosalyn was just on in Edmonton in Canada, and now you're Australia. And then I said one of our commenters is in Uganda.
I heard that. That's pretty cool. And that's because I've got a client who's over there at the moment, and they're saying their internet's really patchy. So I'm glad that they're on.
Yeah, and then and they were earlier for sure. And then George, who just commented on what Rosalyn said, is in Florida. I know for sure he's in Florida. So there you go. We're covering a lot of bases just in the
and you're in Canada, right?
In Canada. And yeah, I guess I could say I'm not even anywhere near Rosalyn. I'm in the East Coast near Nova Scotia. So look at that. Worldwide.
And that's pretty cold there at the moment, because I was talking to our friend Tim Allison yesterday. So I sent a picture of it. It's like it's cold in Nova Scotia at the moment, right?
Well, it is, but do you work with Celsius or Fahrenheit?
I can do either. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. I mean, once you're in the minuses, it doesn't matter anyway, right? But having said that, Tim and I, because we're 3 hours from each other, I'm going to tell you right now, in Celsius, what we work in, -2 where I'm at, and Tim is -3. So it's not that bad right now. It's been like down to like -15, but Kelly Falardo, my co-host who's on here, she's in Edmonton, where Rosalyn is as well. And I think it's -32 today, but here's the kicker. 5 hours north of where they're at in Fort McMurray, it was 63 and 64 earlier this week. Minus.
That's crazy. Minus. Well, you see, there you go. See, well, you'd know this because you're Canadian, right? But I used to do a lot of work in Russia, in Moscow. And I used to go there during spring and summer because I can't do -40. And they said, you know what? The only difference is when it gets to -40, they don't let the kids go to the park because their teeth start to crack. It's like
that's a pretty big difference. Holy, yeah. What I was going to say is, once you get to a certain point, if you're outside, I think you. I said this earlier. There's not not probably a better way to say it, but you could freeze to death without knowing. It's like
your eyeballs start freezing.
Yeah,
and your teeth split. Yeah, you literally.
Yeah, and so I mean that's what -64, -60. That's insane. I mean that's insanity. And where we're at, in this part of the world, a really cold day down here would be like -20, -25. And because it's like humid cold, like New York, it goes right through your bones. But like in Western Canada, it's a drier cold where the -60 some is. But I don't care where you're from, -60 is cold. Doesn't matter
and then
what.
You come to my country and it's +50 Celsius.
Yes.
Celsius.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. I mean, the grass is always greener, as they say.
It always is. Yeah.
We dived in already, Ed, but I want to bring us back just one quick second and ask you to go back a step. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your backstory. What we like to do usually is get the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves. And it doesn't matter how deep you go. People always say, how far back do you want me to go? Because we're going to dive in deeper anyway. So just as much as you want to tell us, but just to give us a little bit of an overview.
Do you want the story on the podcasting or just on life itself?
You know what? Because we're going to talk about a lot about podcasting. If you want, go to the podcast, if that works okay for you.
Cool. So my podcast is called Human Impact with me, Ed Andrew, and I set it up, about 2.5 years ago when it was just called the Ed Andrew Show. And I did it for a very specific purpose, right? Is that I was in the UK and I'm English, but I've traveled all over the world for donkey's years, been in Australia for 20 years. I was back in England, hadn't lived there for a while. And I was back in an industry which I hadn't been involved in for a while, which was law and professional services. I was a lawyer a long time ago. But I was being asked to do a lot of leadership work and transformational work. And I thought, well, my network's not very strong in the UK because I haven't lived there, even though I've got a lot of clients there. So I thought I'll have a podcast and I'll start interviewing, all of the major players in this field. And, I probably got into episode 20 and I'd already done all of that. It's like, okay, where am I going to go from here? And I had a few other people in as well that I wanted had nothing to do with that world. And like a guy like Tim Smith, who's founded the Eden Project, which creates these like eco biodomes around the world, which are very, very cool. And he also has got 7 Grammys. He's a music producer who's gone into the environment. But I like people like that. It's far more, to me, it's more exciting. So I decided, okay, well, look, I've sort of taken this as far as I can take it. What do I do now? And then I started enjoying the conversations with scientists, environmentalists, entrepreneurs like people at the top of their game, and thought, well, actually, it's far more important to me to create a show which showcases our impact on the planet and the universe and the environment from both a business perspective, but also an environmental perspective. And so I just started interviewing, the world's thought leaders and emerging thought leaders in those fields. And that's sort of how it morphed into why it's called Human Impact. So it was very strategic. And then it became something which I loved as opposed to business. And I think a lot of people I've spoken to who, podcasting takes up a huge amount of time, right? It does take up a time. The thing which I love the most about it is talking to people. I don't like editing. I don't like marketing. I don't like pushing it out there because my natural place to be is to talk to someone. And I think that I remember talking to our friend Tim. We were just talking about Tim Allison, and he's saying, we have to be careful it doesn't just become work, because when it becomes work, we're no longer interested in it, because it's there for play and fun and learning and sharing. It's not there for work. So that's really the genesis of what happened. And here we are 2.5 years later. And the also thing I think to remember is that, and we can talk about this, is a lot of people are doing series as opposed to just my shows are like 134. But I've just had a 7-week hiatus simply because I had to dive really deep into my business. Like I just don't have time to honor everything in the show. And I think it's important to realize that, it is up to us. Obviously, you've got to maintain your audience and let them know what's going on, but also don't let things get in the way of your absolute focus. In other words, if you're most of us for our podcast aren't monetized, right? Yours might be now, but most of us aren't, because they weren't started out as a monetization strategy. So if that's the case, enjoy it, but don't let it become a burden on everything else that you do.
Love that insight. And here's a follow-up to that. And this is something Rosalyn and I were just talking about. And I've asked a couple of podcasters over the week, is about numbers and listenership. How much of a focus do you place on that? And I ask this because we see so many people come into podcasting, stick around for 2 months and go, whoa, wait, I thought I was going to get 500,000 people listening to the show an episode after a couple of months. I put in all the work of the last 8 weeks. And so we see that a lot. So I'm curious how much focus you put into that.
Yeah, well, I think I might have got it wrong, but I think it was it Grant Cardone? Does he have a podcast? Grant, yes, he does, doesn't he? Yeah. I think he was, and this was about 1.5 years ago. I might have got the wrong person. If I am, apologies. But he said, look, he had pivoted his show, and he wanted to get back to 1 million people listening. But he was saying, it's cost me $1 million in advertising to do that. Right. So, the reality is, I think the average number, 90% of all podcasts have an average listenership of 150 to 200 people. Like, and if you go to books and, you're an author, and here we go, there's a little plug. I'm in this one here. Just the second one just came out. Thank you very much to all our fellow co-authors, right? The average book sells 350 copies. So I think when people come into the world of podcasting, you've got to be realistic. Like, who is your target audience? You might have a really specific niche, and there might only be 1,000 people who ever listen. That's cool if your niche is 1,000 people. If you want to go into crime and true crime, your niche may be in the tens of millions. You've got to figure out, if you have a small construction company and you just want to talk to local people in that area in Ontario, you're going to have a very small audience. But if that small audience is very engaged, it doesn't matter. So for me, the focus was on providing value first and then seeing what people resonated with. And I haven't really changed the content. I might change my interviewing style a little bit as we get better at what we do as well. But initially, my focus was definitely not on numbers. It was on the quality of the guest, because I knew the quality of the guest would bring in people into the show. And also that I could, and what I do now, to be honest, Corey, is this. It's like in my training programs, my teaching, all the work that I do, which pays me, I will go and send people. I say, go and listen to these 5 episodes on entrepreneurship, or go and listen to this, veteran, or go and listen to this Olympian. And so I use it now as another piece of data, like another tool in my toolbox for what I do in my in my work. So I think it really depends. And therefore, if I'm playing that game, it doesn't matter what the size of my audience is, because I'm doing it for people I am working with. If you're doing it to expand and bring more people into your world and network, then obviously numbers are more important. But the funny thing is I use Chartable, which I'm sure you use and everyone else doesn't, and I don't really do anything with it. And I get messages saying, you're now in the top 20 in India, or you just hit the top 30 in Netherlands, and then the next week you're not. And the truth is, a lot of podcasters will put out that message, I'm now in the top 20 in India, or I've been in the top 20 in 50 different countries. Well, that's probably true. The reality is, in order to stay there, you're going to need to be getting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 listeners every episode, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting there is one thing. Staying there is another thing altogether. And it could be just that the time you got there happened to be, like 3 a.m. at a certain place, and there was like, you were the only show that had a new show updated, so they saw yours first. And there could be so many variables to make it happen that quickly. And it's funny when you say this, because we had a guest, and I can't recall. I know exactly which guest it was, but I can't recall if he was on this event like months ago, or if it was actually it was on my podcast itself. And his name is Doug Sandler, and he talked about what he does, his strategy, and he said it openly. Like, I never share stuff that people say privately, but he said openly that one of his strategies is he actually picks guests who would be ideal clients for him. And here's the interesting part. When you hear that, some people might think I'm saying because that would be good for listeners. No, he's actually saying this person is a target client. I'm going to bring them on the show, and we're going to work with them on the show. And now I'm going to know them quite well, and either them or somebody they know might become a client of mine. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how many listeners he has, as long as he can get the guests. It doesn't
matter. And then there are quite a few podcasters who've been around a long time, like literally 6 or 7 years now. And they've started to monetize their podcast by selling podcast services, right? In other words, if you want to get on 6 or 7 shows, you pay me whatever it happens to be. But one of their strategies to hook them, because they can't just turn up to, Tim's show or your show and say, by the way, have someone or my show, and just, you're going to have this person on the show. So they, as part of their strategy, they allow them to go onto their show. So then, and the interesting thing there is that, and the interesting thing to discuss with you is whether you think that diminishes their brand, or the other way is saying, well, we're going to give someone else a shot at this who would never normally be able to share their message. See, some people, but 50% say it diminishes your brand if you keep putting on people who are not at the level we're used to. And the other half will say, well, I think it's really good you're giving them a chance.
Yeah, that's well, the other side is too, another question. So my answer is, I think it probably depends on the person's strategy for their show, and whether that, it depends on their view of it. Like the host, how do you view it? Like, do you think, okay, I'm giving somebody a break and a chance? If that's how you feel, then that feeling alone should be worth doing it if it is you. But the other side, when you talk about like podcast swaps, where 2 hosts will have each other in the show, and then it ends up that they do that a lot. Like, one of the 2 people involved there could reach out to everybody, said, let's do a podcast swap. So the other question is there a diminishing return if everybody is having that same guest, whether they're known or not known, on their show? And so I tune into podcasts, and I tune into 10 shows, and Ed's on it. Is that good? I mean, it's good for Ed, but is that good for the host, every one of those hosts? Or does that hurt podcasting because you're going, well, geez, that person's everywhere. I'm not even hearing anything fresh and new on podcasts.
Well, that's the thing. And I think the other thing that comes into that, and this is the trickier thing, is when that podcast swap is offered. And so, you say, yeah, I'm very happy to be on your show. I'd love to be on your show, but I don't think there's any correlation with what you're talking about and the guests on my show. Because that becomes awkward.
Absolutely.
Because in this day and age, how many people have podcasts? Many. And how many people want to have a podcast? Oh, by the way, I just set one up. It's now 3 weeks old. I've got 1 guest. Do you want to come on in return? It's like, how do we manage that? So I'm very clear. I just say, look, these are the types of people. These are the subject matter we discuss. If you're not within that subject matter, then the answer is going to be no, simply because there is no value to the audience. There may be value to your audience, but there's no value to my audience.
Yeah, it's such a true and great point, because and you have to start considering that, because you only have a finite amount of time, and it only takes one interview that's not like completely out of alignment that people go, wait a minute, this is what's going on here. This show's different now, or it's the first one they listen to, and they would be a perfect fit for every other episode.
There you go. And the thing is, people will tell you, Corey, I'll get messages. By the way, what was all that about? It's like, you can't win. You've got to make a decision for yourself, though, and say, look, this is congruent to the show that I want to put out there. And look, we all know this. There will be some guests you just think, that this wasn't a great episode. And sometimes they are the ones that you're really excited about. It's like it's rather like the it's the green live button that does it. Is you have a wonderful conversation before, and then as soon as they know they're being recorded, everything just clamps up. So my strategy has been right from the beginning when that happened is I record from the moment I start talking, and then say, okay, well, 3, 2, 1, we're now going. And so basically you can continue the conversation, and also you can actually sometimes pull out the pre-recorded section if they agree to it, which may be better than the recorded section.
100%. Well, even now on Zoom, whenever I schedule calls with people, my Zoom is set up automatically to record, because I've had too many times where I've been halfway through an amazing interview going, oh crap, in my head, and going, okay, now I gotta run this clip as if it was the start and everything. And so now I record it automatically. Well, I had a great conversation with somebody last night, which if I could go to him and say, hey, this would be great for the show. Are you okay with me airing it? We had just had a conversation, and there's nothing that was said that couldn't be aired or anything. So now it just records. So I even have, I'm debating whether or not I'm going to reach out to this person and say, hey, can we run this as an interview? But yeah, it's automatic recording, and they don't care. I don't care. It's not like I'm recording them to use it for anything. But again, to your point, hey, it's a win-win for both of us if the person's okay with our conversation being put out there, because it was just a coffee conversation, just like we're having now. So,
exactly. And the other flip side to that is how many times I've hit the end button when we've gone off air and wished I'd carried on recording.
You know what? I'll tell you something that's helped me with, I'll tell you why I started doing that, or what, I'll say it differently. I left it recording one time, and it was so good that I did, it reminded me to keep doing it. But I'll also say one thing too, before I jump to that, about the alignment. I've also had the opposite scenario of what you said. You had somebody you think they'd be a great guest, turned out to be not a good guest. I've had a scenario where on the surface, this person doesn't fit my show at all, but everything about them feels right, so I take a chance. Again, I'm not live, so I can just ditch it if I have to. But here's an example. I met somebody at an event called the New Media Summit, and what she does is she's like a pet whisperer. So she focuses on pets. My show's about influencers. So on the surface, you go, where's the fit? But my point to her is, because she said, well, I don't know, is there a way to make it fit? She's even telling me, maybe there's no fit. And I said, influencers own pets, don't they? And so my fit is, let's talk about when your pet's acting nervous and all that, what's a reflection of? Is that a reflection of you as an influencer, what you're bringing home for energy in that? So all of a sudden it becomes a show that's actually unique from any other show we've done, but it's still talking about influencers. So it's still aligned. So I do feel
you know what? It's a bit like, the old adage of Facebook marketing is throw all the old Facebook's advertising strategies or marketing strategies being throw out all of the old paradigms of marketing. Just figure out who your avatar is and what they do, and then go to the places where they hang out. So, humans have pets, humans have kids, so go to the places, because that's, you might find the biggest show is a pet show. Go and advertise there, because there are people there, right? And they're going to be like you.
Well, theoretically, for that kind of show, you could even run Facebook ads to pet groups for that episode.
Absolutely.
I should have probably, actually, now that I think about it, I still can. But yeah, I mean, it's all about, I think, figuring out what's in alignment for your show, or what you could create that could be in alignment for your show, but don't bring somebody on that you just know is a bad alignment just so you could get on their show. That the tempting part of that too is they might be the opposite scenario. They might have a really big show and they want to do a show swap. So the temptation would be, I'll bring them on my show, but they have no fit at all. Well, again, is that worth the trade? I think you'd be better off to see, is there another way I can offer them value, and be blunt with them about the fact that, I'd be a great fit for your show based on what I speak on, but what you speak on wouldn't be a good fit for mine, because I don't think it's worth trading and having them on your show and diluting your show just to get a spot on another show. But that's the temptation.
Well, and also, I think, there's an element there as to how big your show is, right? And if you go back to the concept that Tim Ferriss has, which I quite like actually, and I've mentioned this a few times to others, is that his view, or at least is what he says publicly, whether it's true or not, who knows, but it's what he says publicly, right, is that he reckons that only 10% of his audience, any 10% of his audience listens to each show, because he started off having such a wide group. Now he's into psychedelics, and that's going to narrow his audience, right?
100%.
But, when he's got, he's got, someone like, I don't know if Jack Welch went on his show, but he probably did at some stage, I imagine, or someone like that, or, whoever it is, you're talking, people right at the top of the business world, and then he gets the porn star from Vegas. It's like, you're going to get a very different audience, but he doesn't care because he's saying, I know my audience is so enormous that I'm not alienating them. It's just they've got different interest groups. But then that's a different ballgame. So he can bring in, and I like the idea of getting, my vision is to have, I want to have like a radio show where I can also bring in my friends and we can talk. When you bring in different people, you talk because they're seeing the humanity. And you're not just sitting there talking to someone. You're actually saying they see you as a person with the people around you who are important to you. And just that human dialogue brings entertainment.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I agree with you completely. And it's funny because if I look over the years on my show, how much it's evolved. It's funny. It started as an interview show. It's still an interview show. We started talking about things related to self-development, personal development, leadership, influence. It's still that. But it's interesting to see how much it's changed from a standard type Q&A show. Like, I even had it, like a lot of early interviews I had questions in front of me, especially because you're buddy. I had like the 10 questions. I only asked those questions. And now it's to the point where I don't think I looked at a question in like 5 years. And it's interesting how much it's evolved as much as I've evolved. But I say this because for me, if I had to choose personally, and everybody's different, but personally, I'd rather listen into the show it is now because of the conversations than I would of the standard Q&A. But there's people that love the standard Q&A, like John Lee Dumas with Entrepreneurs on Fire. For a long time, he had the standard same questions, and he ended up having, I don't know what he has now, but he had over 1 million unique listeners. So you can't say people don't like those kind of shows. It's just for me personally, I like the conversations where intuition and fluidness could bring it anywhere.
Yeah, look, my show's always been really spontaneous. I mean, that's the point. People say, what are we going to talk about? It's like, well, I know what you do. Just leave it to me to figure out what we're going to talk about, and it'll go to its natural place. It's going to be authentic. But it is interesting in how you craft the dialogue, and the greater the caliber guests you get, you realize whether if you listen to Seth Godin, his answers are very articulate and they're very succinct. They're short. They're not long, rambling conversations. So if you're going to interview someone like Seth, you really need to be on your game, because if you want to do that for an hour, if you're lucky to get him for an hour, you've got to have a lot of information to be feeding back to him. Other guests can come on, you ask them the first question, and that's the entire interview, right? That's that's your hour. So it depends on who you get, and others, I think, when they surprise you, is you've got to do your research on your guests, because some guests, even the large celebrity guests, and you listen to them on other shows and you think they're just really bad interviews. Now, are they bad interviews because the guests themselves have got this very canned way of talking, because they're always selling and servicing, selling their product, always sell. Now, to me, that has no interest to my audience whatsoever. So I have to figure out, do I want that person on because they are, they have a lot of influence? But if it's just going to be standardized, and my questions will take them to a different place. So you've got to think, okay, am I going to be allowed to take them to the place I really want to take them to? Because if they keep going back to the norm, it's not going to make for a great interview. And we've got to. The more you do, the more you've done. 6,000 or 7,000 now. Crazy number. You've done more interviews than Seth's written blogs, I think. Really. But do you still have to figure that out as well? Do you think, okay, well, what is this person really coming here to say?
It's interesting you asked that, because early on, I definitely did that. Now, I don't, because I feel like, again, it's just I go with the intuition that it's going to come out. Whatever's meant to come out from the conversation will. Mm-hmm. But I still have to be, the guide that keeps us there too. And so I might go into an area, just like I might go into an area where it seems like it's less relevant to the overall conversation, but then I'll bring us back. But I do the same thing there. So I have kind of an ultimate goal, but my loose goal is I want to help everybody up level. So wherever you're at now, I want you to help go up a level. So my questions are going to be geared towards helping people up level. Mm-hmm. So now, having said that, I do certainly go into it with a goal in mind. but my goal is always fixed around what I want the listener to get out of this person. But I'll tell you, and so it's jump the shark here a little bit, but I'll tell you another thing that I do though, is my goal is also to get them to talk about stuff they've never shared before. So
yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned people that have, you're used to their interview style. So what great example of that is Jack Canfield. So Jack Canfield, I mean, he can go either way, but he could answer a question that could be a half hour for one question. Yeah. But here's the thing with Jack, he's done so many interviews. It's hard to pick something that he might not have shared before. So somebody like that, that's my goal, is to say, what can I get him to say that he hasn't said before?
Well, Jack was the one example I was going to tell you about, because I had a wonderful conversation with him, and I think it was facilitated with you and then Tim Allen. I can't remember where he came from, but anyway, I had Jack on the show, and I also had Mark, Victor, and Crystal on the show as well, right? And Jack and I spent a lot of time in India, and we do the same work, right? We're both transformational coaches, so we just had a laugh sharing our practices. But he was the one that I clicked end when we were about to go off air, and then he says off air, he said, Ed, if we were neighbors, we've been in each other's houses, all the time, because we're just kindred spirits. And that's like, okay, well, I've got that. I know he said it, so I use that as a testimonial, but it's not. It was taken off air. It's like, oh.
Yeah, well, and my intuition may be meant to bring up Jack for that reason, but and here's the wild part, but synchronicity. You brought me back to the part that I didn't say that I was going to say, and people are probably saying, wait a minute, you said you're going to comment on that, which was the leaving the recording going part. So you brought us back full circle. But with Jack, like I guess, and it's kind of a full circle thing, but with Jack, somebody like that, my goal is get him to say something he hasn't shared as much. He may have shared it before, because I can't listen to the 6,000 interviews he's done to see if he said everything. But I will say one thing I got him to say in the last interview I did with him, which most people don't know, but he said it publicly, so I know it's something I can air. But they sold Chicken Soup for the Soul as a brand. A lot of people don't know that. Years ago.
As a franchise, yeah.
Years ago. And people don't know that. And so I did 3 interviews with him. That was the first time I got him to say that. So, and I knew that, but I didn't want to say, like, I didn't want to be that guy. If he's not sharing it often, I don't want to be the guy that says, did you sell Chicken Soup for the Soul? Like, I just let it come out. But my point is, I'm trying to get stuff out that they haven't shared before, if there's somebody that does a lot of guest spots. So to go back to the recording, leaving it running, where it happened with me was Lisa Nichols. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, of course I know. Yeah, Lisa Elevate, who she is on Instagram. Yeah, she's smashed the. She's taken Martin Luther King and basically made that her deal, right? Yeah,
she's. I mean, she's crushing it at the highest level, and she was in The Secret. She co-wrote Chicken Soup for the African American Soul. She's Mind Valley. She's like almost the face when you go to Mind Valley. She's there.
Yeah, well, we can talk about Mind Valley. That's a different ballgame, because I'm not sure that's going so well anymore. I don't know, but she Lisa, I know well. Yeah, she's well known.
Yeah, and so and I don't know either on Mind Valley side, but with Lisa, we were doing an interview, and it was, and again, same thing. I'd interviewed her a few times, but this interview, just the energy, everything felt different. And the other ones, the energy felt great, but we talked about speaking business and more strategy. This one was more about abundance and more energy-based stuff, and it was for a specific project that I'm working on. COVID slowed it down, so it won't be out for a bit. But the point is we were talking, and after the interview, so the backstory to it really quick is I was interviewing John Gray earlier in the day. So Men Are From Mars, John Gray. He tells me about how he sets intentions, which I thought was brilliant. He said every day for 8 years, he said, acted as if his publisher was calling him saying, John, the book just made the New York Times list. So instead of him acting as if like, I'm so happy to be a New York Times bestselling author, he went one step further and acted like the person was calling it. I thought that was so unique. So I said, I'm going to try that. And I was in San Francisco interviewing him. Then I had to fly to San Diego for that night to interview Lisa. And I'm driving in the rental car and I start doing it. I'm like, I'm going to talk as if I'm Lisa Nichols talking to me after the interview. So anyway, I said, Corey, thanks for your gift and all these things that I hoped she'd say after the interview. End result is they kept it running. It wasn't me. We just had a conversation, but it kept running. And so, and she said, you can keep it running or whatever in the clip. So I got this clip I can use where she said, thank you for your gift. I just came off a round of doing 155 interviews, and your questions are so rich. You got me to say 2 things I've never said in my life before, and I was crying both times. And so I wouldn't have had that had I stopped the rolling. So then I was interviewing Les Brown a month later, and then so I left the thing rolling. I said, I'm not taking the chance. And then Les, it was so humbling as well, both Lisa and Les. But he said, do you speak as well? and I got the clip. It's cool because he's taken off the mic, so you know it's not like a fake thing. Yeah. And he said, "You speak as well." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I knew it. You can't pull one past the old man. I can always tell when I'm in the presence of greatness." And I'm like, Les Brown saying this. Well, again, to your point, I learned not to shut the thing off just because the recording.
Yeah, well, I learned that with Jack. It's like, that's the last time I've ever done it.
and you know what? It might sound like a weird part of the conversation we're going to, but this is a powerful lesson for somebody because, as you know, Ed, I mean, it's very, I did it for years, turned it off right after it was over. And then I didn't have one of those moments like you did with Jack for years, like 3 or 4 years, maybe longer. So I just kept shutting it off. But then I had one of those moments and I was like,
well, you see, with the Jack one, I got the first half of the sentence, right, when we're talking about we're both kindred spirits. And then he says this.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, so that the bottom line is learn to leave it rolling, you know, but also start early, as you said. That's the other lesson too, right? Start
right from the get-go.
Because then they're more comfortable, their guard's down. And again, you still got, I mean, because you were recording and they didn't know you were recording at that point, you still should go back and say, hey, I recorded this, can we hear this? I mean,
they can see on Zoom, they can see the little red light. They know they're on. And Jack's a pro, so he's not going to have anything going on in the background as he's recording. He's just sitting there in his room doing the rest of it. But the thing with people like that is that, and this is one of the things on this subject for podcasters, and this is something, we were talking about this, about accessibility of people like Jack for podcasters, right? And he was saying, I was thinking of taking out an ad on Instagram saying, Jack Canfield's available because no one's calling me because it's COVID. But he said, I'm sitting at home. I've got nothing else to do. I've got the dog and my wife, and I've got to do something. I'm focusing on my health and stuff like that. But it's like, come and talk to me. I am here. You can. I mean, I know it sounds easy to say that because how do you go and even find him? But the reality is you go through, the loops that we all go through, right? And you get to talk to him. But these people are not out of your reach. And I think one of the principal messages is that nobody is out of your reach, right? If you want to try hard enough, okay, you can go and get anyone you want. My belief is I can get anyone I want. Now, it might take them 6 months or 12 months to agree to come on the show, depending on their schedule and everything else. And, we're just mere mortals, okay? It's the fact that when they listen to your show, they know that they're going to have a genuine conversation held with kindness and compassion and empathy. And if there are things which are very traumatic, which they want to bring up, that you can hold that space for them.
You're 100% right. And that's a whole, I mean, I'm passionate about it. So I could do a whole, and I probably will at some point, a whole, whether it's a class, whether it's a training, or whether it's just an interview, whatever, about getting bigger name guests on your show and getting behind the electric fences, like I like to call it. But it all comes back to leverage. It really does. And to your point, I mean, and that leverage, here's the interesting part. That leverage could be an interview who's so good they can't ignore you. As Steve Martin said, be so good they can't ignore you. So crush it in your interviews and have them saying, wow, this is one of the best interviews I've ever done. You send that clip to somebody, everybody wants to be in the best interview they've ever done. Yeah. So what I'm saying is early on, especially, it might not be as easy to get Jack, but if you have a couple of those clips where people are on your show and they say, this was amazing, and you brought stuff out of me that I'm so glad I finally got to share, or whatever that sounds like, that's just being so good they can't ignore you. You send that clip to somebody, you're going to get other guests.
Yeah, and there is, let's be straight about this. There is some strategy behind this. Like there was a guest I really wanted who was just incredibly busy, called Dotsie Bausch. She's an Olympian, silver medalist, American in the velodrome, on the bicycle, right? And she was on Rich Rolls, and Rich Rolls is probably one of the biggest shows out there at the moment, by none. He's seems to be. I know Joe Rogan's out there, but Rich they're talking about totally different things. But he's really crushing it. And even he said, it's taken me years to get you to turn up, and they live in the same neighborhood. She's just very, very busy lady. Anyway, and so I went through her media agency, and he's a lovely guy called Rick Scott, and I discovered when I was talking to him that he had managed Earth, Wind and Fire. So even though he's a sports agent, he's also the #1 jazz and blues agent in the States. I thought, well, he's a hockey player. It's like, he's a really cool dude. I'm going to get him on the show, right? And I said, I'd like to get Dotsie. And he said, you sure? I said, I also want to talk to you. And it's like, why? It's like, because you've got a really interesting background. Like, you manage one of the biggest bands in the world, right? And he'd turned down, he'd just been turned down by, what's her name? I can't believe I've forgotten. Anyway, he'd just been turned down by the two of the biggest names in the market, husband and wife, right, at the time, and this would have really put him out there. And then the same week, he managed to land Earth, Wind and Fire. It's like, well, the universe is working. Anyway, as a result of the podcast, he sent me a message saying, Ed, you brought out stuff that my parents didn't even know about me, and he said, I'm so grateful for that. And he obviously shared that with Dotsie because they're friends, right? And, a week later, she comes on the show. So,
well, I was going to ask you, was the band that he was turned down by, was it Mamas and the Papas?
No. It was the guy, the guy who's on The Voice. Oh God, I can't believe his name.
Or not The Voice. No. Adam Levine.
No. He's oh God, just give me some female soloists in the. Oh God, I'm trying to think of his name. I'm going to tell you. Think of like one of the biggest soloists in like 2000, female soloists in 2000, who's still got a massive presence. And it's not Britney. We're talking more. Oh, for God's sake! And they're a married. They're a couple. They were a couple. And it's
Faith Hill and Tim McGraw.
No, but it's like then. No, they're not country. It's
I'm gonna bug you now.
I can see them both as well, and it's just not coming into my head as well. I could go and look, but I'm talking to you live.
Yeah, all good. We'll figure it out. Anyway. We'll put it in the comments later. So you made me think of Blake Shelton, but it's not. I don't think you're talking Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani, but because they're a couple.
No, it is. It's Gwen Stefani and who is the first husband?
Bush.
Yes, Bush.
Gavin Rossdale.
Gavin Rossdale. Gwen Stefani and Gavin Rossdale. Thank you, Corey.
Okay. When you said The Voice, I was trying to get the connection from The Voice. And
it's Gavin Rossdale, right? So basically, and they just said, look, we think you're just a little too young for where we are, because he was probably in his 30s in the UK. He's a Canadian, but he landed Earth, Wind and Fire. It's like.
It's one door closes, one door opens, right? So a couple other things I want to mention just before we bring things to a close, and somebody commented, there's a comment here I want to tackle as well. That's somebody asked you a question, but just one other thing I was going to touch on that you mentioned about the idea of being able to adjust the interviews, like Seth Godin, as you said, it's just like, you got to have an hour's worth of questions if he has any answers. But it made me think of a unique situation I had, and I'm curious if you've had anything like this. Are you familiar with the name Guy Kawasaki?
Yeah, of course.
I never assume, right? So he's crushing it on social. He was the Apple evangelist. He wrote one of the books is great. The Art of Art of Charm.
Oh, he's also the global ambassador for Canva. He's also there writing him. Yeah,
that's a pretty big deal too. So Guy Kawasaki, I wanted to interview him and reached out after I went to the. What's the event called? Social Media Marketing World.
Yeah. I know.
I always do. Talking about a little tip is if I met the person and I met them at an event like that, I always feel that there's a better chance they'll be interested, because they'll say this person that was at that event, it was there with, they're paying to be at the event, meaning me. They're with the same type of audience I'm reaching out to. So it kind of maybe gives them that comfort that, okay, this person is already investing in themselves or whatever that looks like. So I'll send a picture of me with them and say, hey, I got a chance to meet Guy at the event and want to bring him onto the show. And the interesting part is his assistant, I think she told me we'd have a half hour. I think she said 30 minutes. So then I get on the interview with him, and we're recording, we're not live. And I don't know why, but I said, just want to make sure, so we have a half hour. And he goes, who told you that? And so I said, well, I thought, and so I explained that, and he goes, no, I don't have that long. And I said, okay, well, how long do we have? He goes, I just know we don't have that long. And I said, 15 minutes. He goes, you don't have that either. And so I said, how long? He goes, 7 minutes. So I had to do
7.
I planned for 30 in 7 minutes. Now, the good thing is with somebody like him, his answers are so rich and he is succinct. That 7-minute interview felt like an hour for people listening.
Yeah.
But my point of this is, again, you have to be willing to adjust. And imagine if that was my first interview ever, right? So my question, though, Ed, is have you run into that?
I've run into situations where certainly the time frame is very limited, but generally it's always expanded. I think the biggest issues that I have faced is like, it's always going to be the biggest interview you have. Like when I did Jack, and typically the internet was playing, it's like, oh my God, was he? And because, remember Zoom were changing everything during COVID about how you let people into the room and the links and everything else. Anyway, it was a bit of a schmozzle, but he came on and it was absolutely fine. It's having to adjust, and I've had, so backups. So I think the biggest thing for me hasn't been like condensed. Certainly, I've had interesting times when, you ask a really meaningful question, you get a yes or no. It's like, that's not good, because I'm thinking 10 questions down the line. I'm not thinking yes or no. So you've got to adjust. So I started off by writing 5 or 6 things in a notebook that I wanted to ask them. Then I realized that, it depends on where the thread. So I think that is important, like have at least 4 or 5 questions that you want to ask so that if you get interrupted or they just shut you down really quickly. It's very rare, but they might do that. So that works well in yours. Like, okay, well, I've got 5 questions I want to get out of them, or 5 bits of data. I'm just going to ask 1. And that's what you do in that situation. But I think that the biggest challenge in the way that we work in the digital age is how many backups do you have?
And that, you're so true. And this again made me think of another guest I had years ago, like way back when, like I say, way back when, I don't even think this aired. I think it was for my newspaper that I used to have. I'm going by memory on this, but
yeah.
So like, let's say it's 12 years ago, this interview, but there's a guy named Mike Bullard, and he's really well known in Canada because he had the longest running late night talk show. So he'd be like the Canadian version of, say, David Letterman. And so Mike Bullard, I get him on, and this is after the talk show's done. And his answers were, like you just said, yes, no, and really to the point. And so what I would do to him, and it worked, it was still tough, but I said, tell me more about that. When he'd say yes, I'd say, tell me more about that. When he'd say no, tell me more about that. And then he'd go a little deeper, but it was a lot. But that way I didn't have to keep having new questions. I just kept pushing him down.
You just kept pushing him.
But I'll tell you one thing that he said that was like an amazing story. It took like 3 tell me more about that, but it was such a great story that I don't know if he shared before, and was one of those stories as a comic. It's brilliant because the interview I was doing is I was interviewing him as a comic. As a comic myself, I was passionate about that. And I said, have you ever had a hell gig? And he said, of course, if you perform comedy, you've had a hell gig. Yes. Yes. Okay, well, tell me more about what hell gig. So, but my point was, it took a while to get it out. But the hell gig he told me about was a place he used to perform, and he said that there'd be like 100 people there. And the first night he went, he was like, "This is amazing! 100 people coming out to see me perform." And he said it took him like 3 weeks to realize that the reason people were showing up is because they had 99-cent spaghetti. At the time, like it was like the happy hour that the spaghetti was 99 cents. And he come after the 3rd week because people weren't laughing. They were looking at him strange and eating. And so he asked somebody. And anyway, he said once he realized he could watch now who was reacting, he said there'd be like 4 people there for him and like 100 on there for spaghetti. Anyway, but the story went on for like 10 minutes. But it took tell me more 3 times. But I did get it out of him. But that's the kind of thing, if somebody's listening to this and they're just starting, you have to, as you said, a backup plan. In this case, I had backup questions, but I wanted to know more about the hell gig. I was so that I'm like, if it takes me 3 different angles, I'm gonna get that hell gig out of him.
That's crazy. Corey, I've got 5 minutes. I don't know if someone else is coming after me because I've got to take a call
we're 5 minutes over, so I didn't keep playing.
Oh, okay, no worries. And what was the question?
That's now that you said that, and by the way, my last question was simply because you can answer them both at once if you want. My last question is: have people asked you for sample questions in advance, and if so, do you provide them? And you can say yes or no to that.
The answer is yes and no. Okay. So I have been asked, and I've been told these are the subjects this person likes to talk about. It's like, thank you very much.
So we're on the same page there. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, no, I don't give sample questions. No.
Yeah, and I get that thing. This is what they like to talk about, and I don't ask anymore. I don't want to talk more about that because I'm scared they'll say you have to stick to these. So I say, okay, awesome, like you just said.
Yeah, and it's like, thanks very much. And then if I want to talk about it, I will, but most of the time I don't. So.
I don't want to because of what we just said earlier with Jack, right? If they have standard questions, that means they're covering that same question over and over again on interviews.
And the thing is, people like Jack don't do that. They know that if they have an interview they want to talk to, they will just, we just rambled. We just talked about India and all of the different places and like the energy treatments we get over there. We just had fun. Like for me, I want my guests to have fun.
And you know what? On that note, I'm going to check out that episode. I don't think I listened to that one yet. Here's the question. So can you see the question on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a question back to when we said about the right fit, not the right fit. So George, who I know quite well, he's asking, could you make me fit? And I don't know if he's asking for a spot in your show or more just because our conversation was about sometimes you can make somebody fit.
Look, in answer to your question, George, clinical chemistry, probably not. Longevity, yes. I've had lots of people on the show talk about longevity, people like Jim Hart from Biosarbonaut. Devin White's been on from The Field a couple of times. The founders of Apeiron. Obviously, when I'm talking to Jack and I'm talking to Mark Victor Hansen, we're talking about longevity. I've had Rian Doris from Flow Research. So that is definitely something which I'm very passionate about from a scientific, from an experiential side. So that's yes, but clinical chemistry, I don't know anything about that. So,
I think you're probably in the majority there. I don't think a lot of us know a lot about it. And I know George does know a lot about it. So very cool. So yeah, that was George's question. So I want to make sure we got to that. So Ed, this has been an absolute pleasure. I want to be, as you mentioned, time-wise, I want to make sure we keep honest of the time. But I do want to ask you, how can we learn more? Because I want to make sure we give you a chance to tell people how they can listen to the show and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, the show is simply called Human Impact with Ed Andrew. It's on everywhere you can possibly find. If you want to find a little bit more, you want to go and listen to the show notes, you want to find more about me, just go to edandrew.com. No S, just edandrew.com. That's as simple as that.
Amazing. Well, thanks for keeping me honest with the time. It's been good for me too because I got to run off and pick up a young child. So thank you so much, Ed. Always a pleasure. I salute you. I thank you. And as always, I like to call these to be continued because I know it's not the last.
Corey, my pleasure. Look, I could talk. We could talk for hours. It's just I can't. That's all.
I know, totally. Oh, and I have a hard stop, but it's rare. Usually, my hard stop is because I have a call or something after. Today, my hard stop is because I have a kid that's at school that needs to be picked up. So
there you go. That's just as important. Mine are about to wake up.
I probably woke them up.
Take care, Corey. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure. We'll let you run. Thank you again, and have an amazing rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Awesome stuff. Such another great guest. So amazing to have Ed join us. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us throughout this week. As always, thank you on behalf of myself and Kelly. I'll add that in as well because Kelly was with us for like 99% of this week. So thank you, Kelly, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I see George, just for those that may not see that comment, George thanking Ed for replying to his question. And so, George, what Ed said is that he could see that being in alignment around longevity. So maybe you should reach out to Ed and see if he might be a fit for the show. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. It's been a powerful week. I summarized it a little bit earlier today, so you can go back in the replay and see my summary. If you didn't, I don't want to take you all through it once again because I went through a summary that lasted about 5 minutes of everything that took place. But such an amazing week for me. I'm filled with so much great energy. And if you're wanting to write a book, release a book, record a podcast, be on a podcast, if you're wanting to speak on stages, I'm hoping we filled your tank this week with knowledge. And I'm hoping we've given you enough that you can work with to crush it at the highest level as an influencer or whatever you're trying to do in terms of getting your message out there. That's really the purpose of this week. And we just had some rock stars on once again, as always. I'm always amazed and floored by the amazing guests that we have on when we do the Amplify Your Message week-long event. Also, for those of you keeping up and paying attention, we as we said earlier, we have the 3 books in the Blue Talk series out now. We're actually working on the next series, which is going to have George in it. So we have George who's going to be featured soon as well. So we're working on book number 4. That's kind of an update. All things Blue Talks, you can go to bluetalks.com. If you want to know how to get on the Blue Talk stages or in the books or any of that kind of stuff, you can reach out to me directly, or you can go to bluetalks.com and contact me. The other thing I'll add, which I mentioned earlier today, is a kind of a cool announcement, is the show is now officially on the C-Suite Network. We've been working toward getting it up there on the C-Suite Network. And that means that I've been told by the end of the day, Tuesday, it'll also be on Apple TV. I believe it might already be on Roku TV, depending on how you have Roku set up. Amazon, I know it's on Amazon Fire, the Fire Stick or whatever. And Opera TV, I believe it should be already on there. So yeah, Blue Talks is making its way around to the various different platforms. Of course, we're always on YouTube. We just did the new trailer, which I shared today. If you want to check out more about Blue Talks and you haven't seen any of the live talks yet, there's the podcast as well. So all things Blue Talks, the best place to go is bluetalks.com. And other than the C-Suite Network channel and those TV aspects of it, everything else is on that page. We just have to add the C-Suite part. We were waiting until that was done, so that should be up next week. But the YouTube channel is still on there too. So everything Blue Talks, bluetalks.com. Once again, thank you so much for giving me a purpose. Thank you so much to Kelly for joining us. And thank you on behalf of Kelly. Thank you to all the amazing guests we've had on this week. And thank you for all the viewers and listeners for joining us. As always, I'm always floored by all the great viewers we have join us and from how far away and all the great things that come along with doing this. So thank you so much, my friends. More to come. The next time I talk to you guys, we'll be close to or have just launched our new membership site. So more on that next time. But until that time, please take care, be safe, and join us again on the Blue Talks channel.